Chapter 1374. In the Heaven Chief Realm, the Netherworld ship tore through the void, hovering at the top of the Heaven Chief Realm. The Heaven Tree swayed, sprinkling its light. The concentration of energy in the immortal cooking realm was much higher than before. 9 years wasn't short, but it wasn't long either. However, it gave the Heaven Chief Realm enough time to recuperate, which made the Heaven Chief Realm much stronger. At least, it wasn't like 9 years ago, when it couldn't even be compared to a second-class small world. Today, in the Heaven Chief Realm, there were many little saint experts, and the great sage didn't just have realm lore did alone. He got off the Netherworld ship. Bu Fong felt the thick, immortal energy in the Heaven Chief Realm, nodding slightly. Raising his head, he looked at the towering Heaven Tree, which was so tall that he couldn't see its top. He took a deep breath. Swish! Above the dome, the leaves fluttered. Then, a rustling sound rang out. The leaves of the Heaven Tree fell. The branches clattered as they gathered together, and the branches fell down as if they had turned into a treadmill. Bu Fong was a little surprised. Did the Heaven Tree want him to step on it? Bu Fong thought for a while. Without hesitation, he stepped on it. Immediately, the branches moved, supporting Bu Fong's body as he walked toward the dome of the Heaven Tree. Shortly, his figure disappeared. He was holding little Hu, while Hua was standing behind you. Munchi was also standing at the side. The few of them were silent, watching Bu Fong being taken away by the Heaven Tree. Realm Lord Dit leisurely walked over. Today, Dit's cultivation base had increased a lot. He was so strong that people couldn't see through him at a glance. His aura was incomparably calm. Of course, other than the fact that his hobby of being naked did not change, the other changes were quite huge. In the Heaven Tree, Bu Fong did not know why the Heaven Tree had summoned him back in such a hurry. However, Bu Fong could sense the urgency of the Heaven Tree. He was surrounded by the branches of the Heaven Tree. Soon, the scene in front of him changed. It was as if a ray of light had burst forth from the darkness. In the next moment, everything in front of him became clear. A figure slowly floated out of the darkness. It was the spirit of the Heaven Tree, a human figure condensed from the branches. The spirit of the Heaven Tree looked at Bu Fong with a profound gaze. "That person is coming back," the spirit of the Heaven Tree said. Bu Fong was slightly taken aback. He did not expect the Heaven Tree to say such a brainless sentence right from the start. Who was coming back? That person who is like you is coming back. He was deprived of everything, and now he is coming back to regain everything he has, the Heaven Tree said. The spirit of the Heaven Tree said seriously to Bu Fong. He seemed to be talking to Bu Fong. Someone like me? Bu Fong was stunned, and then he was shocked. What does that mean? What does the Heaven Tree know? Could the person who is like me be the previous host? Among the 9 clans of Nether Prison, both Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and Di Ting were very afraid of him because he was very similar to the person they were talking about. Bu Fong knew that since he was similar, there was only one possibility. The person Di Ting and the others were talking about was the previous host. The previous host didn't die? He's back. Bu Fong narrowed his eyes. He felt that things seemed to have become a little strange. The man I saw on a jade talisman is the previous host? However, the Heaven Tree seemed to know what Bu Fong was thinking. 10,000 years ago, that man fought with experts from foreign great worlds and was seriously wounded. He was sneak attacked by experts from the 9 clans of Nether Prison. His fleshly body was destroyed, and his soul fell into a deep sleep, sealed in earth prison by the power of the law. That man was a figure from the last age. Because his fleshly body was destroyed, his soul was punished by the power of the law. However, his strength was still mighty, and he deceived the heavenly secrets and turned the power of the law he had comprehended into the Heaven Tree. It was me who created the Heaven Chief Realm and made the barren Heaven Chief Realm flourish. The Heaven Tree was telling the story quietly. Bu Fong was slightly shocked when he heard that. The Heaven Tree was actually transformed from the previous host's power of the law. The difference between a god and a demigod lies in whether one has mastered a complete power of the law. This is also the difference between a god and a demigod. I am transformed from the power of the law, and now that I have gained sentience, I don't want to be destroyed again. So I hope you can help me." The heaven tree swayed, and its tone became somewhat sincere. Bufong was digesting the information provided by the heaven tree at the moment. The heaven tree wanted him to help it, but how should he help it? According to the immortal tree, the previous host should have returned from outside the great world. If he had returned from outside the great world, no one knew how strong the previous host was. Even if he did not have the system, he could be reborn and come back for revenge, so his strength should not be too weak. It would not be a problem if he was a demigod, but if he was a god, Bufong would be in a difficult position. Bufong did not know if the so-called god here was the god of cooking, but Bufong felt that it should not be that easy to become a god of cooking. Karma and grudges are all related to you, and you will meet him eventually. I just hope that you can help me. If I am still muddle-headed, it doesn't matter even if I have regained the power of the law. But now that I have sentience, I am the guardian of this world, and I cannot disappear. Once I disappear, the Heaven Chief realm will be destroyed again. The Heaven Tree sighed with emotion. His wish was simple. He wanted to protect the immortal cooking realm. It was a simple request, but it was not simple either. In fact, it was just a personal emotion that arose after the Heaven Tree gained sentience. Karma? What karma? Bufong furrowed his brows. It was you who released that man's bound soul in Earth prison. It was you who helped him be reborn, and it was you who brought him back, the Heaven Tree said. Bufong fell into silence, his mind working fast. The scene in his memory was somewhat modeled. Earth prison, the bronze palace on the Acheron River. At that time, he had picked the senseless lotus, and a mysterious figure had escaped from the bronze palace. Was that figure the soul of the previous host? It was possible that he could make the great sage of the Acheron vomit blood with one slap. Bufong was somewhat speechless. He had picked the lotus by accident, and it had caused such a big incident. No wonder that man had told him so much. Karma is also a law. The law of the universe is supreme. Since there is karma, it cannot be avoided. I only hope that you can save me when the time comes. The Heaven Tree begged. There was a long silence. Bufong did not agree completely because he did not know how strong the previous host was, and he did not know why the other had returned. Perhaps he could help as much as he could, but he could not guarantee anything. At this moment, Bufong had a lot of doubts. Everything the Heaven Tree had said had a big impact on him. However, Bufong's ability to accept it was not too bad, so he was not too surprised. Swish, the Heaven Tree put him down. It did not bind him for long. Bufong landed. Looking at the swaying Heaven Tree, his eyes slightly narrowed. The Heaven Tree was kind. At least, it had brought good fortune to the entire Heaven Chief realm, allowing the Heaven Chief realm's Heaven Chief realm to develop and live in peace. However, even so, Bufong could not easily believe everything the Heaven Tree had said. Of course, Bufong would keep it in mind. If there was such a day, he could save the Heaven Tree. Seeing Bufong return, everyone's eyes brightened. Realm Lord Dit looked at Bufong with a smile on his face. He had not seen Bufong for a long time, so he missed him a lot. The immortal tree told me that the people from the great world are here. The puppet that was destroyed by the immortal tree's whip when they explored the immortal cooking realm was a product of the great world. Realm Lord Dit said, he asked me to suggest to you that the Earth Prison and the Heaven Chief realms should unite. The people from the great worlds. Bufong's face was expressionless. Instantly, the man from before appeared in his mind. Perhaps that man was from the great worlds. He was also the one who had captured Hades' era. What was his purpose? The Heaven Tree said that the man should be the emissary of the great worlds, who specializes in plundering the resources of small worlds. Nether Prison has become a great world, but it has excluded Earth Prison and the Heaven Chief realms. They can be recognized by the laws of the universe, but Earth Prison and the Heaven Chief realms can't, so that man will definitely attack us. He told us to be prepared. Realm Lord Dit was very serious. This was related to the life and death of the Heaven Chief realms and Earth Prison, so he had to be serious. Little Ha has been captured, said Bufong. Realm Lord Dit's eyes narrowed, and he sighed softly. In Nether Prison, outside the starry sky, on the silver warship, Hades Tenzang was surrounded by many metal puppets. Feeling a terrible aura locking him up, Hades Tenzang grew serious. He could feel the fearsome strength of these puppets. Each of them had the fighting prowess of a perfected great sage. Even Tian Tsang didn't dare to lower his guard. Rumble. One of the puppets moved. He waved his spear, which was made of some unknown material, and emitted a cold gleam. He thrust it out. Hades swept his halberd and collided with the spear. A terrible force exploded, and a rumbling sound rang out. Hades Tenzang focused his eyes. He waved his Hades halberd fiercely, colliding with the spear. Clanging sounds rang out, and sparks flew in all directions. Every time they collided, it would cause a shockwave. 7 or 8 puppets pushed Hades Tenzang back again and again. This made Tian Tsang's anger surge from the bottom of his heart. He let out a long roar. Hades brandished his 3 halberds. A halberd light swept over from all directions, impacting everything. Rumble. A puppet was knocked flying away. The other puppets' mechanical eyes flashed as they scanned Tian Tsang. The next moment, they all used the same trick, a powerful killing move like Hades's 3 halberds. They were imitating Hades Tenzang's attack. What kind of monsters are these? Tian Tsang sucked in a cold breath. He was now convinced that these metal puppets were not made by Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. She was not at this level. The gap between Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's puppets and these puppets was like the gap between heaven and earth. He stomped hard on the warship, but it was unscathed. Then, Hades Tenzang rushed out of the warship and stepped into the starry sky. The puppets imitated his fighting style and kept suppressing him. Tian Tsang's body was riddled with cracks. The collision between the halberd and the spear caused sparks to fly in all directions. Although Hades Tenzang only had his soul in his body, he was furious. The halberd kept sweeping and suppressing the puppets. There was a gap between a spear and a halberd. Tian Tsang took advantage of this gap and attacked one of the puppets crazily. 3 consecutive strikes from the Nether King halberd landed on the puppet, causing it to fall apart and its body to be shredded into pieces. White smoke rose from Hades Tenzang's body, which was caused by him overusing the puppet's body. Inside the warship, Alpha put down the knife and fork, lifted the cloth in front of his chest, and wiped his mouth. Then, he picked up the metal plate with an extremely cold expression. How dare mere ant destroy my little treasure? Kill him. But as the mechanical eyes of the metal puppets outside the warship burst into a cold light. Then, one by one, they soared into the sky. They raised their arms. With a clanging sound, their palms turned into 6 barrels. Rumbling filled the air. Then, one shell after another shot out of each barrel. A dense barrage of artillery shells shot down from the sky, heading straight for Tian Tsang. Tian Tsang's pupils constricted. He recognized the move. It was the one that had knocked Hades' era to the ground. The metal plate under his arm moved sideways, and white flames shot out of its barrels. Boom! Tian Tsang's speed exploded as he transformed into a Baiguang and began to move rapidly. He was actually leading the artillery shells to chase after him. This is a game of cat and mouse. In the warship, Alpha crossed his legs and smiled. Suddenly, his gaze froze. This was because he realized that after Hades Tenzang moved to the side, he had actually guided the artillery shells into his puppet. The next moment, the flames of the explosion swept across the world. It suddenly exploded above the battleship. Mushroom clouds blotted out the sky. A deafening sound rang out, causing people's eardrums to buzz. Pieces of broken fragments fell on the deck of the battleship. In this explosion, he lost 2 of his puppets in an instant, and the remaining one was seriously injured. Some of the broken arms still had electric arcs jumping around. Some of their bodies were sunken in and charred black. Alpha's eyes were filled with coldness and killing intent. Damn it! How dare you treat my little baby like this? Alpha stood up and said in a chilling tone. With his hands clasped behind his back, he slowly walked out. The metal door automatically opened from the bottom up. He took a step on the deck. In a flash, he soared into the sky and disappeared as if he had teleported. When he reappeared, he was right in front of Hades' Tenzing. A terrible pressure suddenly filled the air. The air seemed to have stagnated. His killing intent drilled into Hades' Tenzing's body like tiny snakes. His puppet body was suppressed by the pressure and couldn't move at all. This terrible feeling, Hades' Tenzing's pupils constricted. This man is actually a demigod. You destroyed my little baby, so you can go to hell. Alpha said indifferently. Then he raised his hand and pressed it against Hades' Tenzing's chest. A terrible force exploded out. Crack! The metal in front of Tian Song's chest was crushed. In the face of a demigod, even Hades' Tenzing, who was once invincible, felt a pang of helplessness. Suddenly, behind him, the void suddenly tore open, one on the left and the other on the right. It was as if at this moment, Alpha's escape route had been blocked. Through the crack, at the same time, two dog paws slowly slapped out. One was a white dog paw, and the other was a black dog paw. The two dogs attacked at the same time, trying to kill Alpha Demigod in an instant. Chapter 1375. Suddenly, two dog paws emerged behind Hades' Tenzing. Hades' Tenzing was not the only one who was shocked. Even Alpha felt his hair stand on end at that moment. That's right. In that instant, Alpha's aura was dispersed. It was because the two demigod experts had joined the attack. The next moment, two dog paws came from Tian Song's sides, one on the left and one on the right. They were so fast that they seemed to shatter the void. In an instant, the starry sky exploded, and countless turbulent void currents surged within. However, the two dog paws did not seem to care about the turbulent void currents at all. They were small and exquisite, and they slapped at Alpha. How dare you? Alpha let out a roar as his body suddenly emitted a dazzling brilliance. Above his head, a small world emerged. The small world floated up and down, emitting a supreme aura that could suppress all worlds. There seemed to be the power of the law surging in it. Demigods could comprehend the power of the law, but they were still a little short of comprehending a complete law. Facing the two dog paws, Alpha had nowhere to run. They were both demigods, and neither was weaker than the other. After blocking all of Alpha's escape routes, the two of them collided. Boom! Boom! Alpha's palms collided with the two dog paws. A terrible explosion occurred, and the blast seemed to tear the whole world apart. The surging airflow caused the surrounding void turbulence to be constantly pushed away. Tian Song gave a muffled snort and flew backward, spinning helplessly in the surging waves like a small boat. After a long time, he stabilized his body in the void. Even so, he was still panting heavily. He looked at his chest and saw that the metal material there had been crushed. A loud explosion resounded. Alpha's body smashed into the warship. The battleship shook violently. The intense trembling caused a buzzing sound to resound from the warship. Unfortunately, the attack that the Lord Go and the Harken had agreed upon did not kill Alpha on the spot. Alpha climbed up from the battleship. His body was filled with an extremely oppressive and terrifying aura. Good. You want to kill me? These two dogs are really bold. Alpha wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, his eyes cold. He had been careless and had accidentally been ambushed by Truth Listener and Hell Dog at the same time. He was almost beaten to death. However, since these two dogs didn't beat him up, it meant that he still had a chance. I gave you a chance, but you didn't want it. You actually chose such an extreme method. Why do you have to resort to violence when we can talk things over? The Alpha was furious. He thought he had done everything right. After learning that this area, which was originally a chaotic small world, had actually advanced to a great world, he did not choose to rob it. Instead, it was a reasonable equivalent exchange. But these two dogs actually wanted to put him to death. He had almost been tricked. The main reason was that he did not expect that there would be two demigods in this newly born small world. Even though their understanding of the laws was not very thorough, they were, after all, demigods. They were existences at the same level as him. The void was torn apart. Truth Listener and Lord Go walked out of it at the same time. Since they had failed, there was no need to hide anymore. Lord Go's fat jiggled as he strode out with elegant cat-like steps. Truth Listener was still shrouded in black smoke, but his 4 short legs were not hidden. In short, they were 2 dogs. It was somewhat funny that these 2 dogs were so invincible. At least, Alpha could not help but want to laugh. He was an emissary from a great world and was recognized by the experts of the divine dynasty. Despite his noble status, he had condescended to come to this barren land and almost died. In that case, there was no need for him to hold back. Let this piece of heaven and earth completely turn into dust. Rumble. Alpha's eyes suddenly lit up. In the next moment, his figure instantly disappeared from where he stood. When he reappeared, he was in front of Lord Go, pointing a finger at Lord Go's head. What a fat dog! Zhuang's kitchen knife is already thirsty, Alpha said coldly. However, as soon as his palm fell, he teleported again and disappeared. It was the kind of disappearance without warning, not because he moved too fast. It should be the use of the power of the law. The fat on Lord Go's face jiggled. Suddenly, he raised his exquisite paw and slapped at a spot in the void. Rumble. There, a figure suddenly appeared. The fist and the paw collided. The void crumbled inch by inch. Lord Go's fat jiggled. Alpha's figure disappeared again, as if he had teleported. You can't do anything to me. The law I comprehend is the law of teleportation. It's one of the supreme laws of space. How can you 2 mere dogs stop me? Alpha's cold voice rang out. After exchanging a blow with Lord Go, he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was actually behind D-Ting. It was really, as he said, teleporting and appearing and disappearing unpredictably. D-Ting was shrouded in a black mist. He thrust out his paw and exchanged a blow with Alpha. Both of them trembled and retreated. Clearly, they were neck and neck. To become a demigod, one had to start comprehending the laws. However, it took a lot of time and energy to condense the divine sense. Only then could one be considered a demigod. Hades Tenzang had given up on breaking through to the demigod realm because he did not have much time. That was why he chose to conquer Nether Prison. He did not expect that instead of conquering Nether Prison, he would die. Alpha comprehended the law of teleportation. What law did Lord Go and D-Ting comprehend? Hades Tenzang was a little curious. He hovered in the sky in the distance. He was no longer qualified to participate in a battle of this level. The wound on his chest began to slowly converge, and soon it was healed. He turned his eyes and rested them on the warship. He glanced at Alpha, who was fighting to his heart's content. His mind flickered. Then he sped away. With a rumble, he landed on the warship. The metal door at the entrance of the warship was open, and Hades Tenzang took the opportunity to rush in. In the sky, Lord Go kept slapping his paw. D-Ting followed Lord Dog's example and threw out his paw. No matter how Alpha teleported, he could not do anything to them. For a moment, the battle had entered a white-hot state. In fact, Alpha was also a little surprised because up until now, the 2 dogs had not revealed the power of law they had comprehended. This made him feel a little sullen. He felt that he was being looked down upon. Suddenly, Alpha's figure disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was on the warship. He looked at the 2 dogs, his face indifferent. His chest heaved violently. No matter what, whoever wants to kill me must die. The Alpha roared. The next moment, his divine sense surged. A clanging sound rang out. On the warship, suddenly, one huge crossbow after another emerged. Buzz, as soon as the crossbow appeared, a cold light emerged from it. Surprisingly, the warship's weapon of attack was not an energy cannon, but a crossbow. This is the Divine Dynasty's God-slaying crossbow. Although it's a simplified version, it's more than enough to kill you 2 dogs. After you die, I'll ask Zhuang to skin you and cook you. The Alpha grinned. In the sky, Lord Go narrowed his eyes. The Harkins snorted coldly. Who's that Zhuang? Whoever he is, I'll just kill him with a slap. D-Ting and Lord Go spoke one after another. Although their alliance was only temporary, they were equally angry at those who ate dog meat. Alpha's cold laughter echoed through the starry sky. The next moment, he waved his hand. An arrow shot out from one of the huge crossbows. The arrow was very thick, with mysterious patterns carved on it. In addition, the material it was made of was not ordinary. That was why the arrow shot out was so fast. It wanted to pierce through Lord Go and D-Ting with one shot. The arrow headed straight for Lord Go. In the distance, Alpha was laughing maniacally. Lord Go's mouth twitched. "I don't know who gave you such confidence." Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice rang out. In the next moment, his body began to change. Instantly, he turned into a huge, three-headed dog, breathing earth prison flame and barking. He swung his paw again. The void twisted and shattered inch by inch. The arrow whistled through the air, stirring up turbulence in the void. It shot toward Lord Dog's head, intending to pierce through it in one shot. In the distance, the void twisted. The netherworld ship tore through it, slowly moving forward. On the netherworld ship, Bu Fong and you were sitting calmly, watching the battle in the distance. The terrifying waves had already attracted the attention of many experts around. It was a battle between demigods. It was hard not to attract attention. As soon as they appeared, they saw Lord Go's paw collide with the arrow. Alpha's wild laughter came to an abrupt stop, because he saw Lord Go's paw slap on the arrow, but it was not damaged at all. On the contrary, his crossbow bolts began to crumble from the inside out. With a boom, it completely exploded, turning into thousands of fragments that drifted in the air. Damn it, how is this possible? Alpha's eyes widened in disbelief. He watched the god-slaying crossbow being smashed by a dog's paw. He was terrified. Although it was only a replica of the god-slaying crossbow, its power should not be so weak. Could it be that the law that this black dog comprehended was very powerful? Was it stronger than his law of teleportation? How is that possible? How could a dog in a remote place comprehend a law stronger than his law of teleportation? Was he not even as good as a dog? No, those smugglers must have sold fake goods. Alpha roared inwardly. Bang, bang. A series of gunshots rang out. One god-slaying crossbow after another shot out at incredible speed, rapidly approaching Lord Go and D-Ting. It was as if it wanted to pierce through both Lord Go and D-Ting at the same time. Its power was indeed unparalleled. No matter how Alpha looked at it, he did not think it was a fake. However, the black dog was still waving its paw and smashing his crossbow bolts. It seemed that he had really bought fake crossbow bolts. Without the crossbow, he could only fight the two dogs. However, Alpha was not confident that he could win if he had to fight two of them alone. He thought for a moment. He was ready to retreat. The crossbow bolts were fake, but the warship could not be fake. He had spent almost all his wealth to buy it. It was an offensive warship from the Divine Dynasty, and its defense was invincible. A demigod could not break it at all. Standing on the deck, Alpha activated the warship's defensive array. Instantly, a layer of arc-shaped brilliance burst forth and enveloped the battleship. Standing in the warship, Alpha watched with a sneer. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. He could not believe that a group of natives dared to attack him, the emissary of the Divine Dynasty. You're dead. When the Divine Dynasty's border emissary comes, all of you will die. Try to kill the emissary. This is a felony punishable by the destruction of the world. Alpha raised his chin and sneered. D-Ting furrowed his brows. Lord Go's eyes were unkind as well. They bombarded the warship's defensive array again, but they could not break it. Lord Go's eyes narrowed. Even the law he had comprehended could not break it. Looking at Alpha, who was laughing in the warship, Lord Go's fat jiggled. Suddenly, a stream of light came shooting over from a distance. Lord Go looked over, puzzled. He saw a steaming flatbread hovering in front of him. Lord Go looked at Bu Fong in the distance with a puzzled look on his face. Bu Fong clasped his hands behind his back and said expressionlessly, "Eat the flatbread. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to break the shield." When Alpha saw that, he thought he had heard the funniest joke in the world. You want to break my warship's defense by eating a flatbread? And you're talking about luck? Do you really think I bought a fake warship? Natives are natives. How stupid. Chapter 1376. The Divine Dynasty was supreme. It ruled over many great worlds, and many of its experts could even trigger the laws of the universe and suppress the heavens. Although his worship was a defective product smuggled out, it was still very powerful. Ordinary demigods could not break its defense at all. That was why he was so confident. He had tried it when he bought the warship, and he found that he could not break its defense with a slap. As an emissary of the Divine Dynasty, he was not qualified to ride on such a warship, even though it was not as high-end as the real divine ships of the Divine Dynasty. However, even if it was not a high-end warship, it was not something that these few natives in front of him could destroy. Yes, he did not expect to see two demigods. After all, it was rare for two demigods to appear in a newly merged great world. However, even two demigods might not be able to break his warship's defense. You want to break my warship's defense by eating a flatbread? On the deck of the warship, Alpha clasped his hands behind his back and sneered. Looking at the black dog with a flatbread in its mouth, the corners of his mouth curved upward in disdain and ridicule. Natives were natives. They were always so stupid. They had no idea how vast this world was. Naturally, Lord Go was disdainful of Alpha's mockery. This outsider had no idea how magical Buffon's flatbread was. If one was lucky, the fortune flatbread could double one's strength. It could even pull the souls of the dead out of the transmigration. The so-called fortune was not something that ordinary people could imagine. Crunch, crunch. Lord Dog's mouth closed, and soon that piece of flatbread was bitten into pieces and swallowed into his stomach. Fortune energy surged. The Ting, on the other hand, looked at Lord Go and Buffon with a strange look. Obviously, he did not know much about the fortune flatbread. However, since Earth Prison Dog chose to eat the flatbread at such a critical moment, it must be something special. The flatbread entered his stomach. Soon, the fortune energy surged through his body. Suddenly, the black fur on Lord Go's body fluttered slightly. The three Cerberus heads opened their mouths and barked. The dog's bark shook the void, causing the sky to tremble as if it was about to shatter. Buzz. The Lord Go could sense that, as the fortune chi spread, his understanding of the power of the nomological laws began to increase. The originally incomplete nomological laws, at this moment, it was actually completed. This feeling was very magical. The fortune flatbread had actually helped him perfect the power of law, although it was only a temporary improvement. But it was enough. The corner of Lord Go's mouth twitched. The three-headed Cerberus returned to its chubby form. The defensive barrier around the battleship floated in the air, flickering with radiance, constantly resisting the impact of the energy. Looking at the defensive barrier and Alpha, who had his hands behind his back, the corners of his mouth curled up into a disdainful smile. Lord Go smiled faintly. Then it slowly stretched out its chubby paw. The black fur on the dog's paws fluttered in the wind. Then, the paw slapped toward the battleship. When Ting saw that, he fell silent. He had wanted to ask Earth Prison Dog to join hands with him and use the power of the law to break the defensive barrier. Since Earth Prison Dog wanted to attack by himself, he would let him do it. After suffering a setback, he would naturally join hands with him. The black mist swirled again and enveloped his body. At this moment, Lord Go's paw finally fell. Buffon saw everything clearly from a distance. He did not know what ability Lord Go had gained after eating the fortune flatbread. However, when he saw Lord Go's confident look, he thought he must be very confident. Inside the battleship, Alpha smiled confidently. The corner of Buffon's mouth twitched slightly. That guy doesn't know what he's facing. Boom! The dog's paw fell and smashed the battleship's defensive barrier. A loud explosion rang out. A terrible rumble spread in all directions, sweeping across the whole world. The world seemed to be destroyed at this moment. Standing on the battleship, Alpha's face froze. The frozen expression on his face as he laughed made him look very comical. How is this possible? He cried out involuntarily. Looking at the paw slapping on the defensive barrier, his battleship let out a deafening roar, and its surface was covered with fine cracks. His entire being was shrouded in fear. Was this really a great world that had just been formed? How could a dog from this great world be so strong? Boom! An explosion rang out. The defensive barrier was completely shattered. The battleship was instantly exposed to the starry sky. Alpha's figure vanished from where he was, and when he reappeared, he was hovering in the starry sky. Lord Go's paw fell again. This time, the exquisite paw hit the battleship and cracked it, leaving a paw print on it. Looking at the paw print, Alpha's heart ached. All sorts of heartache appeared on their faces. Alpha's anger had reached its peak. He soared into the sky, trying to fight Lord Go again. His anger made him lose his mind. He kept teleporting, appearing and disappearing in the starry sky. Lord Go narrowed his eyes and yawned at this acrobatic trick. Buzz, all of a sudden, Alpha's figure emerged behind Lord Go. His face was full of resentment. He held an azure dagger in his hand. With a ripping sound, it stabbed at Lord Go. A vague power of law lingered over the dagger. With one move, the dagger stabbed down. He wanted to poke a hole in Lord Go. This was not an ordinary dagger. It was the soul-snatching dagger. One stab would damage one's divine sense. It was a weapon aimed at demigod experts. All of a sudden, Lord Go's body swayed in the void. He took a step forward and slowly turned around. Looking at the dagger Alpha had thrust, he gently raised his paw. The power of the laws emerged from the claw. Looking at the power of law, Alpha's eyes widened as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. It was a look of disbelief and horror. This is the law of time. Alpha sucked in a cold breath. When he saw the power of law lingering over the dog's paw, that was the only thing left in his mind. He could not believe that one of the supreme laws of the universe, the law of time, would appear in this remote great world. Even in the Divine Dynasty, there were very few who mastered the law of time. How could a mere dog master such a law? Rumble. The dog's paw swept across. Alpha, who was in a state of shock, did not even have time to put up an effective resistance before he was swallowed by the paw. A loud rumble rang out. Alpha trembled all over, and he opened his mouth as if to spit out the papillion steak he had just eaten. With a boom, the void shattered and countless spatial turbulences lashed at Alpha's body. In just a flash, Alpha felt as if he had aged countless years. The moment he collided with the dog's paw, he, who was young, became old, his body aged, and his fighting prowess weakened to a terrifying degree. He was almost blown apart by the paw. He was seriously injured. It was not until he had flown thousands of miles away that his appearance recovered. But even so, he was already covered in blood. His law of teleportation was as fragile as a biscuit under the attack of the Black Dog's law of time. A deafening rumble rang out. The warship exploded from the middle in an instant. A figure shot up into the sky from the broken part. White smoke rose from all over his body. In Tian Tsang's hand was Hades' Era. Era was not in a good state at the moment, but at least he was still alive. The warship was destroyed. A terrible rumble rang out from it, and flames devoured everything in an instant. Then a terrible aura erupted from the warship, and from the broken part, several figures flew out. One of them was a woman riding a little dragon, her hair waving noisily in the wind. She glanced at Alpha in the distance, then at Lord Go and Bu Fong in the distance. The next moment, she sped away on the little dragon and disappeared. Zhuang's burly body was riding on a ferocious beast. He was also fleeing in terror. Alpha's aura was weak. Looking at the broken warship, he felt a little desperate. Just now, he was in high spirits and had looked down on this newly formed great world. However, what happened next gave him a severe blow to the head. Everything he was proud of had been destroyed. How could the natives of this newly formed great world have the audacity to attack him? He was the emissary of the Divine Dynasty. How honorable his status was. Murdering an emissary of the Divine Dynasty was a felony. How dare these fellows? All that was left in Alpha's eyes was flames. Suddenly, he felt a chill run down his spine. The next moment, his pupils constricted. Then, he discovered that a dog had appeared behind him without him noticing. It was a yellow and white dog shrouded in black smoke, but its eyes were full of indifference. The indifference made him shiver all over. For a moment, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave and was about to die. "You can't kill me. I'm an emissary of the divine dynasty." Alpha bellowed in horror. D-Ting watched indifferently. He had no intention of killing Alpha, but as soon as the man appeared, he showed his strong desire and captured the leaders of many small worlds in the Great Netherworld. He planned to take a bite out of the Great Netherworld. The Great World had just been formed, and everything needed resources. How could he obediently hand over the resources to this guy? It just so happened that he could use the resources of this emissary of the divine dynasty. Moreover, from their previous conversation, he learned that Alpha had not appeared here with the divine dynasty's order. His eyes gradually turned black. Alpha grew more and more terrified. In fact, he knew very well that if he died here, no one would know. The Great Netherworld had just been formed, and the divine dynasty had not recorded it yet. His death would be in vain, and it would not be blamed on the Great Netherworld. That was the reason why he came here. It would be great if he could get some resources and benefits before the divine dynasty recorded it. However, he was a little regretful now. Alas, it was too late for regrets. D-Ting's black smoke surged out of him. In a flash, it turned into a large mass and wrapped Alpha up. Alpha howled miserably. His body was already seriously damaged, and now he could not resist it at all. A bone-chilling sound rang out. Alpha's body was completely turned into a pool of blood. But when one reached the demigod realm and condensed his divine sense, his soul was basically indestructible. Even his soul had gained a bit of power. Inside the black mist, Alpha's soul flashed with fluorescent light, darted out of it, and sped toward the distance, trying to escape. Unfortunately, his soul was a great tonic for both Lord Go and D-Ting. Lord Go and D-Ting looked at each other and opened their mouths at the same time. A great suction force burst out of their mouths. Alpha's face was filled with horror. He clawed at the void with both hands, trying to escape. However, a ripping sound rang out. Alpha's soul was torn in half. One half went into Lord Go's mouth, and the other into D-Ting's. Both of them smacked their lips and burped. At this moment, the emissary of the divine dynasty, Alpha, died miserably under the claws of two dogs. He fell in front of the newly formed Great Netherworld. Chapter 1377. Alpha, the emissary of the divine dynasty, was dead. He died very quickly and very peacefully. In midair, the warship was exploding. Although Tian Song could not destroy it from the outside, its interior was extremely fragile. After rescuing Hades' era, Tian Song destroyed the warship. The warship began to explode from the inside out. Terrible explosions swept across the whole world. The Lord of the Wingman Valley, the great Buddha of the West Little Buddhism realm, and other experts all fled. However, the explosions did not last long. D-Ting, wrapped in black smoke, rushed straight into the warship and plundered all the resources inside. Alpha was, after all, the emissary of the divine dynasty, and with his identity, he could collect countless resources while traveling the starry sky. Many of the resources here were suitable for demigods to cultivate. In fact, Lord Go and D-Ting were also very distressed. After cultivating to this level, this world was no longer suitable for their cultivation. If they wanted to break through to a higher realm, the newly formed Great World simply did not have enough resources. Before D-Ting and Lord Go joined hands, they had agreed to divide the resources they obtained this time in half. As the only two demigods in this world, and both of them were dogs, they felt a sense of sympathy for each other. Of course, apart from plundering resources, D-Ting and Lord Go had to erase all traces of Alpha so that the divine dynasty could not learn anything. They did not have a general impression of the divine dynasty, but they knew very well that the divine dynasty was definitely a great power in the starry sky. In short, it was not something that the Netherworld, which had just formed a great world, could resist. D-Ting took away the wreckage of the warship. In return, He exchanged a lot of resources with Lord Go. Lord Go naturally had no objection to this. It was useless for him to take the wreckage. No one on his side knew how to deal with it, and Bufong was just a chef. The battle was over. The storm swept across the whole netherworld. The battle between the outsiders had aroused a heated discussion in the entire netherworld. Acheron's city, Acheron's little restaurant. The store's door was tightly shut, but there were many people inside. Bufong was sitting on a chair, while Hades Tenzang was standing with his hands behind his back. Era was lying on one side, snoring loudly. As he slept, he was recovering his strength. Lord Go was lying under the Path Understanding tree. In front of them was a huge pile of things. These items were looted from Alpha's warship. After the Lord Go and Truth Listener divided the spoils, that was all that was left. What are these things? Everyone was doubtful. He began to categorize these things. Among them, there were strange spirit fruits that shone with purple light, withered tree roots, and strange mineral deposits. These were all cultivation resources, and they were piled up in the restaurant. Everyone rummaged through them, sorting the useful, useless, and things that they didn't know how to use. They were divided into 3 piles. Ores could be used to forge weapons. Hades Tenzang took the pitch-black mineral deposit, intending to forge Hades' halberd. As for the spirit fruits and the like, Lord Dog kept them in his arms. Lord Dog wasn't willing to share these things that could be eaten. However, Bufong took one of the spirit fruits because Bufong could plant it in the heaven and earth farmland. Of course, besides food, there were some small tools in Alpha's collection. Lord Go crushed them into pieces of scrap iron and threw them aside. As for the rest, it was time for the main event. The rest of the things were food ingredients. There were meat, vegetables, and all kinds of strange ingredients. The meat here was cut into pieces and stored in bronze boxes. The vegetables here were covered with crystal water droplets, which looked strange. They were also stored in bronze boxes. When it came to these ingredients, Lord Go and the others naturally turned their eyes to Bufong. It was more practical to leave the ingredients to Bufong. What meat is this? Puzzled, Bufong reached out a hand and picked up a bronze box. When the bronze box was opened, a dense amount of essence chi immediately gushed out of the box. He squeezed the meat in the box. It was a little hard. He couldn't tell what kind of spirit beast it was. For these ingredients that he couldn't tell, Bufong chose to ask the system to identify them. He asked the system. After a moment of silence, the system gave him an answer. The meat in the bronze box is 3-clawed true dragon meat from the Dragon Valley, a first-class great world in the Xiai Divine Dynasty. The system's serious voice rang out. Bufong paused, and then his eyes lit up. Oh, this meat is true dragon meat? The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. 3-clawed true dragon meat? I didn't expect Alpha to know how to enjoy himself this time. He even brought so much true dragon meat on the warship. Is he trying to taste the delicacy of true dragon meat at any time? I didn't expect that emissary of the Divine Dynasty to be a foodie. Bufong's words stunned everyone present. The next moment, they burst into an uproar. True dragon meat? This thing is true dragon meat? No, Lord Go, I've seen true dragon meat. It can't be like this. The crowd began to talk among themselves. They were a little confused. In fact, Bufong didn't know much about the difference between dragon meat and dragon meat. His mind flickered. Bufong's spirit sank into his spirit sea. Looking at the golden divine dragon hovering in the spirit sea, Bufong grinned. Little and I want to ask you something. Bufong said. The golden divine dragon was a little puzzled. Its head glanced at the vermilion bird, then at the black turtle. It looked confused. It didn't expect that the little host would come to ask a question. Why was it such an honor? It seems that the little host has recognized the wisdom of Nicholas, the handsome dragon. The golden divine dragon grinned. The vermilion bird rolled its eyes. The black turtle smiled and said nothing. The white tiger snorted proudly. As a dragon, you should know the classification of dragon meat, right? I just got a piece of dragon meat, and the system said it was 3-clawed true dragon meat. Bufong said. As soon as those words came out, the atmosphere became awkward. asking about the classification of dragon meat in front of the divine dragon. The vermilion bird couldn't help but chuckle. The proud white tiger couldn't help but smile. The black turtle grinned. Indeed, the golden divine dragon knew this question best. The golden divine dragon's face darkened. Can't you ask such a sensitive question so directly? However, thinking of Bufong's identity as the little host, he reluctantly answered. True dragons are different from ordinary dragons. The dragons in the netherworld are all fake or mixed with some dragon bloodline. They aren't pure true dragons. The so-called pure true dragons are all born in the Dragon Valley. Moreover, different true dragons have different numbers of claws. The number of claws is determined by their strength. The lowest is 2 claws, and the highest is 5 claws. For example, this handsome dragon has 5 claws. I'm the most handsome of the dragons, the 5-clawed golden dragon. The Nicholas the handsome dragon began to boast. However, when Bufong looked carefully, he found that the golden divine dragon's claws were divided into 5 claws. It turned out that dragon meat could be divided into such categories. Although the level of a 3-clawed true dragon is not high, this handsome dragon will tell you the truth. Basically, a 3-clawed true dragon has the strength of a demigod, and some monstrous 3-clawed golden dragons have even reached the god realm. So, don't underestimate the dragons. At this moment, he seemed to be possessed by a white tiger. Bufong rubbed his chin, thinking. He needed to digest what the golden divine dragon had said. If the strength of a 3-clawed true dragon was basically a demigod ingredient, didn't that mean that the dragon meat in the bronze box was a demigod ingredient? What the F***CK? You got a demigod ingredient so easily? Bufong thought that he would have to wait until the Lord Go killed D-Ting before he could get a demigod ingredient. This was a pleasant surprise. After chatting with the artifact spirits in his spirit sea for a while, Bufong left. His mind returned. Bufong's eyes were burning as he looked at the piece of dragon meat in the bronze box. The dragon meat seemed to be emitting a luster. Bufong boy, hurry up and make sweet and sour true dragon ribs for the Lord Go. I didn't expect this to be dragon meat. If I had known, I would have exchanged all the dragon meat in D-Ting's hands. The Lord Go said impatiently to Bufong. Saliva was already dripping from his mouth. The dragon meat grade was very high, and the Lord Go could feel it. Although he didn't know how that loser alpha got it, he had to say that the Lord Go had to thank him. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched, but he was not in a hurry to cook. He picked up the other ingredients and appraised them. The vegetables in the bronze box are Kuan vegetables from the Kuan Peng Si, a first-class great world in the Xiai divine dynasty. The system's serious voice rang out again. The ingredients in the bronze boxes were quite precious. The other ingredients were from second-class or third-class great worlds, and there were even some unknown small worlds. These ingredients were not as precious as the 3-clawed true dragon meat and Kuan vegetables. Kuan vegetables. Do Kuan really exist in this world? Bufong was stunned. He remembered a well-known saying in his previous life. There's a fish in the northern nether called Kuan. It is so big that it cannot be stewed in one pot. Cough, cough, Bufong coughed dryly. He had transmigrated for too long, so he should remember the famous saying correctly. Looking at the Kuan vegetable in the bronze box, Bufong could not help but take a deep breath. No matter what, these ingredients seemed to be pretty good. It seemed like there were quite a few new dishes to study. The surrounding crowd, looking at Bufong holding the bronze box, the corners of his mouth curled up in a meaningful manner. They slightly narrowed their eyes. What on earth did Bufong think of that made him so happy? Bufong stored all the ingredients into the system's dimensional storage. Of course, Lord Go didn't say anything. Giving the ingredients to Bufong was the right thing to do. Was he supposed to eat the dragon meat raw? Bufong was holding a bronze box in his hand. He glanced at the crowd, and under the Lord Go's hopeful gaze, he picked up the box and walked toward the kitchen. However, just as he lifted the curtain of the kitchen, the bell jingled. A clear knock on the door stealthily rang out. Bufong was a little bewildered. Why was there someone knocking at the door at this time? At this moment, the sky was very dark. People in Acheron City knew that Acheron's restaurant wouldn't open at night. So, there shouldn't be anyone knocking at the door at this time. You carried little Who, walking to the door. With a creak, she opened the restaurant's door. As soon as the door opened, a deep dragon roar rang out. A graceful figure with a little dragon was standing quietly in front of the restaurant. You looked at the figure, a little bewildered. Bufong, who had lifted the curtain and entered the restaurant, paused, looking at the woman suspiciously. She seemed a little familiar. She seemed to be the woman who had escaped from Alpha's battleship on the dragon. Now, this woman's face was much more lively. She looked at you, then at the people in the restaurant who were looking at her. She seemed a little nervous. After bowing to them, she nervously stepped into the restaurant. The little dragon lying outside the door growled. It was a little anxious, but it didn't step into the restaurant. That was because the energy on Lord Go's body had frightened the little dragon. Bufong narrowed his eyes. His line of sight swept around, falling on the dragon's claws. At first glance, he couldn't help but raise his brows. A three-clawed true dragon. Chapter 1378. A three-clawed true dragon? With just a glance, Bufong saw the little dragon lying in front of the restaurant. It was indeed a little dragon. It was just a little bigger than a tiger. Compared to the great sage Acheron's blood-illuminating dragon, it was so much smaller. The blood-illuminating dragon was lying on the ground like a towering mountain. However, Bufong's eyes focused as he recalled what the Gold Divine Dragon had said. Each three-clawed true dragon was a demigod realm expert. In other words, the dragon in front of him was a demigod? No. If it was a demigod, why didn't it appear during the battle? Although Bufong had many questions, he didn't rush to ask. He knew that the woman had something to say. The woman was a little nervous. It had been a long time since she had seen so many people. Alpha had kept her in the warship for so long that she was not familiar with how to deal with people. However, for the little dragon, she had to pluck up her courage. Today, in this foreign land, the little dragon was her only hope. She glanced around and rested her eyes on Bufong. She grabbed her hands nervously and gave him a 90-degree bow. Hello, can you give me one of those purple fruits? Without the purple dragon fruit, this little dragon will die. The woman's voice was pleasant to the ears. However, her words made everyone present a little bewildered. Hades Tenzang looked at the woman, frowning. It was this woman who had led him to Era in that warship. Thus, he felt that he should say something at this moment. However, before he could say anything, Lord Go's dog paw gently tapped, and a purple fruit flew into the woman's hand. Your dragon is very cute. Lord Go likes it very much. Lord Go said, sticking out his tongue and licking his lips. The woman was a little bewildered. She didn't expect to get the fruit so easily. Isn't that a three-clawed true dragon? Why would a demigod die without this purple fruit? Bufong was not in a hurry to go into the kitchen. Instead, he walked out and asked. The woman took a deep breath. She knew that this question had to be answered. So she was silent for a moment, as if she was organizing her words in her mind. The three-clawed true dragon's alpha breeds are not as strong as demigods. Because they were hatched, he smuggled them from smugglers and hatched them, which gave birth to these little dragons. He breeds them to sell in the Divine Dynasty, where many high-ranking officials like to eat dragon meat. Demigod dragon meat is too expensive and the cost is too high. Alpha can't get it, but he can afford to raise this kind of three-clawed dragon. As long as it's fed with purple dragon fruit regularly, the little dragon will be able to live. Otherwise, the side effect of the catalysis will cause the little dragon to die immediately. The woman said, her expression a little gloomy. Back in Alpha's warship, she was helping Alpha raise these little dragons. She was the one who promoted the catalysis and breeding, so she was very clear about the importance of the purple dragon fruit to these dragons. Bufong suddenly understood. No wonder he couldn't feel the demigod aura from the little dragon's expression. It turned out that these little dragons were hatched. Although their cultivation base had been greatly reduced, their meat was real dragon meat. Sure enough, there was no killing without selling. For the sake of eating dragon meat, those upper-class people were willing to go to any lengths. These dragon eggs were stolen from the Dragon Valley. Actually, these little dragons are innocent, the woman said to Bufang with tears in her eyes. Bufang nodded. Seeing that Bufang didn't ask any more questions, the woman came to the little dragon's side. Holding the purple dragon fruit, the woman came to the little dragon's side and handed it to it. The little dragon seemed a little vigilant. The dragon clan's intelligence was not weak, so it quickly opened its mouth and swallowed the purple dragon fruit. Very quickly, the dispirited little dragon recovered. It jumped and flapped its wings, and its aura spread out. It had the strength of the 9-revolution great sage. Thank you, thank you. The woman put her palms together and kept bowing to Bufang, Lord Go, and the others. She was really grateful. Are you working for Alpha? What's your name? Hades Tenzang, who was always gentle to women, asked softly. The woman glanced at him, blushed, and said in a low voice, My name is Azi, and I'm from the Shai Divine Dynasty. I'm a slave Alpha bought from the slave market. A slave? The expressions of the people present changed, and they looked at the woman sympathetically. It was already a miserable fate for a woman to be a slave. I used to be a subject of the great goddess world. Later, the Shai Divine Dynasty invaded the great goddess world. How could it resist the dynasty? It was defeated, and many of its subjects were sold to the dynasty's slave market. The woman said sadly. It was the first time they had heard about the great worlds outside the netherworld, so they were a little curious. Hades Tenzang looked at the woman pitifully, then took out a chair and placed it in front of her. Sit down and tell us slowly. We mean you no harm. This will be your second home from now on, Tian Song said. Sit down and tell us slowly. We mean you no harm. Bufang looked at Tian Song, who had a gentle expression on his face. Tell us about the outside world. What is the Divine Dynasty, and what are the great worlds like? Hades Tenzang said, patting the woman on the shoulder. She was actually very beautiful. Her eyes were big, and her eyelashes were long. When she blinked, her eyes seemed to speak. She was very beautiful. Her eyes were big, and her eyelashes were long. When she blinked, her eyes seemed to speak. Now that she was out of Alpha's control, she was much more agile. Well, tell us slowly. We're listening. Don't worry. We mean you no harm. Bufang nodded. When Bufang spoke, the woman breathed a sigh of relief. This is a newly formed great world, so you may not know much about the divine dynasties. In fact, the world we live in is called the chaotic universe. It is very vast, filled with countless experts and gods. Although it is vast and huge, except for the unknown depths of the chaotic universe, the rest of the world is controlled by the 3 divine dynasties. The 3 divine dynasties are the Shai Divine Dynasty, the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty, and the Titan Divine Dynasty. Each divine dynasty is composed of countless great worlds, and below them are the small worlds. That's how the chaotic universe is formed. The great worlds are further divided into first class, second class, and third class great worlds. This newly formed great world of yours can only be called a third class great world. Aziz said. At some point, you had poured her a glass of sweet and sour plum juice. After thanking him, she held the cup and took a sip. Just one sip, and her eyes immediately lit up. Gulp, gulp. She drank all the juice in the glass in one breath. She had never tasted such a delicious drink before. She felt as if all her exhaustion had been swept away at this moment. Under the gazes of the crowd, she seemed a little embarrassed. However, with her throat moistened, she continued speaking. The starry sky we are in now belongs to the Shai Divine Dynasty, and my hometown, the great goddess world, belongs to the immortal spirit world. Because of the war, many of my sisters and I became captives. Also, the ruler of the Shai Divine Dynasty is the celestial race. The ruler of the immortal spirit Divine Dynasty is the immortal spirit race, and the ruler of the Titan Divine Dynasty is the Titan race. Each race is extremely powerful in the chaotic universe. In each race, there are heaven gods who have mastered the supreme laws of the universe. They are supreme beings who walk in the chaos space and travel beyond the universe. Azi said with great yearning. However, Bufong and the others were already shocked by what she said. Hades Tenzang's pupils constricted, and he sucked in a cold breath. Great worlds, divine dynasties, chaotic universe. It was too abstract and mysterious. It turned out that they were so tiny in the past. The so-called Great Sage was really like a speck of dust in the face of the chaotic universe. Are heaven gods above demigods? Lord Go asked suddenly, his magnetic voice ringing out. However, Azi gave Lord Go a strange look and shook her head. Above demigods are gods. Although gods are gods, as long as they comprehend the power of laws, they can be called gods. Above gods are heaven gods, who have mastered the supreme laws of the universe. Lord Dog nodded with a thoughtful look on his face. As for what the supreme laws of the universe Azi mentioned were, although many people were puzzled, they did not ask. Azi seemed to understand what the crowd was thinking. She explained the power of laws is also called the Great Path Laws. It can be said that there are 3,000 laws in the 3,000 great worlds. However, there are only a few supreme laws. The 5 supreme laws of destruction, life, transmigration, time, and space are what everyone knows now. As for the rest, I don't know much about them. Each supreme law corresponds to a heaven god. That's why they say that heaven gods are supreme. Aziz said. After saying that, she stopped talking because she had told Bufong and the others everything she knew. She had been emptied. Bufong and the others fell into silence. Aziz understood very well that the information she had told them had a huge impact on Bufong and the others. Like a frog at the bottom of a well who suddenly knew the vastness of the world, a moment of silence was necessary. Bufong quickly came back to his senses. He glanced at Aziz indifferently. In fact, Bufong had been thinking about the level of the system's god of cooking. According to what Aziz said, Bufong could not tell the moment. Was it a god or a heaven god? Bufong had a strange feeling in his heart. It was as if there was a layer of fog in front of him. As long as he could remove the fog, he would understand everything. Therefore, Bufong concluded that the god of cooking was not far away from him. However, when he thought about it again, the corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. He was just a 9-revolution little saint now, and there was still a long way to go before he could become a demigod. But at least Bufong was no longer confused. Bufong, whose mind was much clearer now, twitched the corner of his mouth slightly, and he seemed to be in a good mood. He glanced at the crowd and said, "I'm going to cook." After saying that, Bufong lifted the curtain and went into the kitchen. Lord Go also came to his senses. Saliva flowed from his mouth, and he looked a little impatient. "Cook?" Aziz blinked. Looking at Bufong, who had entered the kitchen, she pursed her lips. "Oh, right, this is a restaurant. I wonder how this chef's dishes compare with Zhuang's. They shouldn't be as good as Zhuang. Zhuang is the chef of a restaurant in the main city of the Xiai Divine Dynasty, and Alpha hired him with a lot of money. How could a chef from this remote place compare with Zhuang?" Aziz had tasted Zhuang's dishes several times, and she still couldn't forget them. The cooking skills of this chef from a third-class great world. Forget it. Chapter 1379. Aziz would never forget the delicious papillion steak and its soft and tender texture. It was the only sustenance of her soul when she had nothing to live for in Alpha's worship. Zhuang's papillion steak was very delicious, and his cooking was very good. He was the best chef Aziz had ever seen. He was indeed a chef from the Xiai Divine Dynasty's capital. Without comparison, there would be no harm. Because of Zhuang's experience, Aziz did not have any extravagant expectations for Bufong's chef. Zhuang's papillion steak was not something ordinary people could cook. However, looking at the expectant faces of the people around her, Aziz felt that she'd better not speak. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Since these people had not seen the world, she would pretend that she had not seen the world either. Hades Tenzang smiled gently at Aziz. Alpha's worship has been destroyed. You can't go back to the great goddess world even if you want to. Why don't you stay here? Tian Tsang said with a smile. You can taste Owner Bu's cooking and use delicious food to sweep away the haze and pain in your heart. Tian Song was very handsome. At least, Azi was fascinated by his face. She did not know what to say, so she agreed in a daze. The little dragon did not seem to feel the malice from the Lord Go, so it entered the restaurant and licked Azi's face. The crowd continued to ask Azi about some information and knowledge about the great world. Bu Fong entered the kitchen. With true dragon meat, Bu Fong was naturally going to cook it. He took the piece of meat out of the bronze box and placed it on the chopping board. Bu Fong reached out his hand and pressed the meat. It was a little stiff. It was a square piece of meat, which should not be too big for a three-clawed true dragon. An adult three-clawed true dragon was a demigod, and its body was huge, not much smaller than the torch dragon. This piece of meat wasn't much. Bu Fong placed the square piece of meat on the chopping board. A golden light flashed. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared. After cleaning the meat, Bu Fong placed it on the table and cut it with the dragon bone kitchen knife. The meteor cutting technique blossomed like a flower, cutting this square piece of meat into 9 pieces of the same size. This was the flesh of a true dragon, a demigod ingredient. Although a lot of divinity energy had been lost, it was still a demigod ingredient. However, in the process of cutting, Bu Fong could still feel the energy surging towards him. This feeling was very unusual. He entered the heaven and earth farmland and picked some spirit fruits and spirit vegetables. He returned to the kitchen. Bu Fong began to arrange the ingredients. He asked the system for a clay pot, cut the scale-tail, scallion, and sun mother ginger, and placed them at the bottom of the clay pot. The scale-tail scallion was placed first, and the sliced sun mother ginger was placed on top of the scale-tail scallion. In this way, once cooked, the dragon meat would not stick to the wok. Of course, after setting up the pot, Bu Fong needed to process the meat. He lit the fire and heated the pot. The spring of life boiled in the black turtle constellation wok, emitting steam. As the steam rose, it brought a sweet taste. Bu Fong placed the 9 cubes of 3-claw true dragon meat into the pot, blanching them to remove the bloodstains. Finally, he washed them with clean water, took them out, and placed them into the clay pot. The arrangement of the pot was a little meticulous. He did not just casually place the meat on it. He placed each piece of meat in the clay pot with the skin facing down. The 9 pieces of meat were piled up, forming a 9-square pattern. It looked somewhat pleasing to the eye. Then he poured wine, oil, soy sauce, soup, and spices into the pot. After the seasoning had covered the meat, Bu Fong covered the casserole with a lid. Buzz, a ball of white flame shot out like a divine dragon wriggling. It drilled into the bottom of the black turtle constellation wok, burning fiercely. Scorching heat was released, incessantly burning and surging. Gulp, gulp. The high temperature bloomed, causing the color of the clay pot to change at this moment. The 3-claw true dragon meat was a demigod ingredient, so it could not be cooked casually. Otherwise, if the meat was uncovered before it was cooked, it could easily cause the energy of the dish in the pot to dissipate. That would not be worth it. Bu Fong clasped his hands, squinting. The divine will in his mind surged, covering the clay pot in an instant. It seemed to seep into the black turtle constellation wok like silk. Everything inside the wok was materialized under his divine sense. Bu Fong's divine will surged in. He could feel that the seasonings in the wok were boiling. The wine and oil were boiling and constantly splashing onto the pieces of meat. Within the meat, there seemed to be a dragon's roar. A virtual little dragon emerged, meandering in the sky. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws, roaring unceasingly. However, Bu Fong did not give up. His mental force continued to lock, like a hand clamping down on that long, meandering dragon. Boom! The lid of the clay pot seemed to be tumbling. As the fire boiled, the dragon meat was shaking. After a long time, Bu Fong's divine will lowered the flame. He began to simmer it slowly. The meat stewed this way will be very soft and gentle. Bu Fong's divine will could feel that the dragon meat in the clay pot had begun to change. It slightly swelled up, and the meat was extremely smooth. It took a lot of time to simmer it slowly. After an hour, Bu Fong finished stewing the meat. Lifting the lid of the clay pot, a thick, meaty aroma wafted out. Because the skin was facing down, he could not see the changes on the dragon meat. He asked the system for a stew pot. After washing the pot, he used chopsticks to pick up the dragon meat from the clay pot. This time, the skin was facing up, and he placed it in the stew pot. It looked like the 9 palaces. The scarlet dragon skin was shaking like jelly. When the chopsticks touched it, it seemed to be shaking. After the meat was placed, he poured the soup from the clay pot into it. Gulp, gulp. The soup was poured into the stew pot, making it overflow. He put the lid back on. After the stew pot was set, he put it into the black turtle constellation wok, where it was steamed. The steaming time was not long. It was only a quarter of an hour before it was over. Bufong opened the lid of the black turtle constellation wok. Steam rose like a wriggling dragon into the sky. Outside, many people were actually paying attention to the situation in the kitchen. While Z was telling them the story of the great world, her mind was focused on everything in the kitchen. Her nose twitched, but she found that she could not smell any aroma. This was incredible for a chef. After all, when Ah Zhuang was cooking, the aroma of the dishes would spread for dozens of miles. The entire battleship seemed to be filled with the aroma of his cooking. That was the most difficult time for her. Her throat would sway with the aroma. Not only her, but even the little dragons would flap their wings restlessly, wanting to taste the delicious food. Of course, Z would not let the little dragons eat it. Compared to Ah Zhuang's cooking state, and then compared it to Bufong's cooking state, the difference between the two seemed very obvious. After all, there was no aroma at all, which was also a skill. Of course, the others were looking forward to it. True dragon meat. They wondered what kind of delicacy Onarbu would make. Gurgle, gurgle. The black turtle constellation wok was boiling. Bufong took the stew pot out of the wok and placed it on the stove. It brewed for a while. Taking advantage of this time, Bufong prepared a flat, round plate and began to set it up. The spirit vegetables and spirit herbs were prepared. They were cut into pieces and piled around the plate, as if they were petals of a lotus. The petals seemed to be in full bloom. As for Bufong, he placed the stew pot aside. When the plates were all set up, Yi Zichen looked around. Then he opened the lid of the stew pot. Buzz, beams of 7-colored light shot out from the stew pot. It was very dazzling, and people couldn't help but be intoxicated by it. A dish that could glow. This was already Bufong's basic operation. Carefully, he took out the meat from the stew pot. The skin of the meat was like jelly, crystal clear and overflowing with colors, reflecting the color of the oil. As he moved the chopsticks, the skin and flesh on them rippled like ripples. 9 pieces of meat were taken out, placed on Yuan Xing's plate. They were placed in the middle of the lotus petals. There were 9 pieces in total, arranged in a 9-square grid. It looked like a sunflower. A rich aroma wafted out from the meat. However, this aroma was enveloped by Bufong's divine will, compressed into the bowl. Bufong looked at this plate of meat, and he couldn't help but be tempted. This was true dragon meat, which he had never tasted before. Swish! He scooped up a spoonful of sauce and poured it on the meat, making it more crystal clear and steaming. Taking a silver lid, he covered the meat on the plate, concealing it. Moreover, all the aroma was sealed inside by Bufong, so people couldn't smell anything. After doing all this, the dish was done. This dish was the famous dompa pork in Bufong's previous life. Of course, Bufong's technique didn't change much. The only thing he changed was the ingredients. However, using dragon meat to make dompa pork was also a kind of extreme enjoyment. Holding the round plate, Bufong walked out of the kitchen. When the curtain was lifted, the bell on the curtain immediately jingled. In the restaurant, all the people who were in the middle of a discussion stopped talking and turned to look at Bufong. The dish is ready. Everyone became spirited. Staring at the round plate in Bufong's hand, they swallowed their saliva. Bufong's dish was really exciting. Even Hades' era woke up from his daze. No one knew if it was because he smelled the aroma of the dish. Meanwhile, Lord Go, who had been lying under the path understanding tree, also perked up and stuck out his tongue. Looking at the eager looks on the faces of the people around her, Z pursed her lips. Sure enough, These people have never seen the world. Look at how excited they are with just a dish. No matter how delicious it was, could it be better than Zhuang's papillion steak? That was Zhuang's specialty, the dish that helped him gain a foothold in the Divine Dynasty's capital. However, Ziz understood. After all, this place was too remote. It was just a corner of the Xiai Divine Dynasty, a world that had just become a great world. It cannot be more ordinary than ordinary. Owner Boo, what is the name of the dish this time? Although Hades Tenzing only had a puppet body left, his sense of taste was still there. Enjoying delicious food was also a kind of extreme happiness for him. Bufang glanced at the crowd. Finally, his eyes fell on Z. From Z, Bufang could feel a kind of disdain. It was not deliberate disdain, but an inadvertent disdain for his dish. This made Bufang perk up. Bufang was very familiar with this kind of disdain, which could only be shown by people who had eaten even worse dishes. Perhaps in Z's eyes, my cooking skills are not commendable. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Z was inexperienced, so Bufang did not blame her. However, this dish could definitely conquer everyone. Bufang glanced at the crowd, and the corners of his mouth curved upward slightly. Under everyone's gazes, slowly, Bufang lifted the lid of the plate. Sizzle. Hot air surged, and within the hot air, there was a rich, meaty aroma. Z stared at it, and the moment the aroma spread out, she froze. A bright light rose from the plate and soared into the sky. She was impressed. Don't but true dragon meat done. Bufang lifted the lid, and the meaty aroma soared into the sky. Chapter 1380. The lid was lifted. The rich aroma seemed to have materialized and drifted out, lingering at the tip of her nose. Z was stunned. Her eyes were completely attracted by the plate. Over there, rays of light bloomed and flowed. It was so beautiful that it couldn't be compared. This was a dish that could glow. For the first time, Z realized that a dish could be so beautiful. Not only her, but the people around her were also attracted by this plate of Dompa true dragon meat. The light dissipated and disappeared. A moment later, everyone could clearly see what was on the plate. It was placed on a blue and white porcelain plate, and the plate was painted with beautiful blue flower buds. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was the plate of meat in the middle. The 9 pieces of meat were arranged neatly in a 9-square grid. The skin of each piece of meat was round, shining with a sparkling luster, like jelly, full of elasticity. Just by looking at him, one's appetite would be greatly stimulated. The aroma lingered on it like a small dragon. This was a completely different way of cooking Zhuang's dragon steak. Could that fat dragon skin and meat be made into something delicious? When Zhuang cooked, he would usually throw away the dragon skin and meat. Zhuang was the best chef Z had ever seen, so she subconsciously compared Zhuang's dishes to the one in front of her. After that, she was shocked to find that this dish seemed to be more delicious than Zhuang's dragon steak. Although she hadn't eaten it yet, just from the visual comparison and the sense of smell, it crushed Zhuang's dragon steak. Compared to the plate, this dish was more beautiful, like a blooming flower attracting people's eyes. Lord Go, Great Sage Acheron, Tian Song, Hades Era, Yuhua, they all stood around the table. There were exactly 9 pieces of Dompa true dragon meat, including Z and Inglong. There were exactly 9 Earth Prison overlords present. You could share these 9 pieces of Dompa true dragon meat equally. Bufang gave each of them a blue and white porcelain bowl. Z took the bowl and bowed to Bufang to thank him. Bufang nodded. After getting their bowls and chopsticks, everyone couldn't wait to start eating, stretching out their chopsticks. He picked up the Dompa true dragon meat on the table. When a piece of meat was picked up, the chopsticks seemed to have sunk deep into the meat. The bouncy meat caused many people to take in a deep breath. The meat was picked up, and the strands of sauce were still hanging. He put it into the bowl. He took a deep breath. There was a smell of sauce and a slight aroma of wine. The function of the wine was to remove the odor of the dragon meat, making the taste more acceptable. Of course, some people like the odor of dragon meat, just like Alpha. Every time he cooked, he would ask Ah Zhuang to leave the odor behind. This kind of person had a heavy taste. However, Ah Zhuang could still make the dragon steak delicious. Violet looked at the square piece of meat in her bowl. The expression on her face was a little excited. Whenever there was delicious food, she couldn't control her inner emotions. She had been locked up in Alpha's warship for too long. It had been a long time since she had tasted good food. She picked up the meat and hung it in front of her. Under the light, the dragon's skin was as clear as crystal. She couldn't bear to bite it. However, she couldn't help it. She opened her mouth and stuffed the meat into it. She closed her lips and bit down. The soft and tender texture didn't make people feel tired at all. Her lips were stained with the sparkling meat, and a soft and warm feeling spread out. It was as if a small hand was massaging her whole body, making her feel relaxed. Gulp, gulp. She chewed. The lean meat and the fat meat mixed at the same time, and the fragrance of the meat burst out to the extreme. Ozzy couldn't help but close her eyes, enjoying the rare taste. It turned out that it wasn't that the meat cooked by Bu Fong wasn't fragrant. It was that Bu Fong had locked everyone's fragrance in the meat, not letting a single trace leak out. As soon as the meat entered her mouth, the fragrance burst out and filled her mouth. This method was very meticulous. It could let people feel the chef's sincerity. This feeling was very good. This was what it meant to cook a dish with all one's heart. Ozzy suddenly had an urge to cry. This piece of meat reminded her of many things. She thought of her tragic fate in the dark days in Alpha's battleship. Those days were the most difficult for her. A piece of meat had touched her emotions, making her body and mind tremble. It wasn't just him. The others also fell silent after eating the meat. The true dragon meat tasted extremely good. After all, it was a demigod ingredient, and its deliciousness was beyond doubt. However, to be able to show the deliciousness of the meat to the fullest without any flaws, it required the chef's skills and skills. This dish retained the dragon's skin and flesh. Everyone knew that the dragon's skin and flesh were greasy. However, the skin and flesh of this dish were fat, but not greasy, and it didn't make people feel disgusted at all. You ate quickly. She chewed and swallowed all the meat in a few mouthfuls. Little Hu, who was lying in her arms, became anxious. Hua and the others also put the meat into their mouths, neither too fast nor too slow. However, compared to Z's table manners, they seemed to be more ferocious. Except for Bu Fong. Bu Fong's table manners were elegant because he wasn't in a hurry. Enjoying food was a process, and this process was also a form of enjoyment. Good. Delicious, Azi was convinced. She didn't expect the chefs in this place to be so good. No wonder it was a place that even Alpha could hate. The people and things here were really interesting. Lord Go kept gobbling the meat into the porcelain bowl. He didn't use his claws. He just ate happily. However, after eating, Lord Go raised his head and licked his lips. Bu Fong kid, to be honest, the sweet and sour dragon ribs is more delicious. Make sweet and sour ribs for Lord Go tomorrow. Lord Go loved sweet and sour ribs, and it was well known. Bu Fong didn't say anything. However, this Dompa True Dragon meat was definitely not less delicious than sweet and sour dragon ribs. Compared to sweet and sour ribs, this dish was much more complicated. Era and the others couldn't stop praising it. Bu Fong's dishes had never disappointed them. Sure enough, it was the right choice to leave the ingredients to Owner Bu. They didn't know how to cook the ingredients, even if they kept them. Instead, it would be a waste of precious ingredients. After a full meal, Bu Fong cleared the table, turned around, and entered the kitchen. Xiao Bai was still standing at the entrance of the kitchen, in a dormant state. He had eaten Di Ting's God's heart. At this moment, he was in a dormant state, and no one knew when he would wake up. However, Bu Fong wasn't worried at all. Nowadays, no one dared to provoke Acheron's restaurant. With Tian Song and Hua, the restaurant's defense was impregnable. Moreover, Hua had perfectly inherited Xiao Bai's stripping posture. She didn't hesitate to strip the troublemakers. They ate and drank to their heart's content. After getting enough information from Z, Hades Tenzang took Z and Xiaolong to a nearby inn and checked into a room. Z had just arrived, so she naturally didn't have any nether crystals. So, Hades Tenzang paid for her for free. Eris sneered because he was the one who paid for it. In the great netherworld, in Nether Prison, in D Ting's territory, black smoke was spreading. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch stood below. Black smoke swirled around him. D Ting slowly descended, holding a glittering crystal in his hand. This is the warship's heart found in Alpha's warship. It's one grade lower than the god's heart, but your previous god's heart was only a fragment. After fusing with this source stone, it should be almost the same as before. At least, your strength will recover. D Ting's gentle voice rang out. Immediately, a blue source stone flew toward Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, who was sitting cross-legged below. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's long eyelashes fluttered, and he opened his eyes. Then, he took the source stone from D Ting. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's eyes flickered, but he didn't say anything. Then he stuffed the source stone into his chest. Soon, thousands of streams of light burst out of the D Ting's territory. It was as if a mighty existence was about to wake up. At the entrance of the territory, the Harkin took a few steps forward and stood there. Looking at the boundless land of Nether Prison, he let out a long sigh. Alpha is dead. The border ambassador sent by the Divine Dynasty should know about this. But even if he knows, he probably won't do anything. After all, the great netherworld is now recognized by the laws of the universe. Alpha deserved to die, but it's good that he died. He has provided the great netherworld with a lot of resources. D Ting stood at the entrance. The black smoke kept spreading. His eyes were deep. The great netherworld is something I've worked hard to form. Now that the Divine Dynasty's border ambassador is here, I'm going to take over it. I'm a little unwilling, D Ting said with a sigh. Earth Prison. It was late at night. Acheron City was still brightly lit. Azi took the little dragon for a walk in Acheron City. Tian Song was their tour guide for free, telling them what was delicious and what was not. The bright moon hung high in the sky. The bustling Acheron City was still full of life. In Acheron's little restaurant, everyone had gone to sleep. The light in the kitchen was still on. Bufong stood in the kitchen, lost in thought. He seemed to be waiting for something. His divine will was already very strong, and he had a hunch about some things. Standing in the kitchen, he seemed to have a premonition that something was about to happen, and it was related to him. Bufong ruled out many other things, and finally, he was sure that he was about to make a breakthrough. That feeling grew stronger and stronger. After 9 years, his turnover was almost at the level of a breakthrough. Bufong waited quietly. He held the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand, twirling it in his hand. Suddenly, the kitchen knife froze in Bufong's hand. Bufong's eyes focused, and his mind flickered. The system's serious voice resounded in his mind. Congratulations to the host for completing the stipulated turnover task. You are now qualified to take the advancement test of a new dish from the God of Cooking's menu. Do you accept the test of a dish from the God of Cooking's menu? The words in his head made Bufong's pupils constrict. The dragon bone kitchen knife turned into a puff of smoke and disappeared from his hand. His eyes narrowed, and he furrowed his brows. Advancement test. Although he had completed the business task, his advancement test had not been carried out. The advancement test, this time, actually led to a dish from the God of Cooking's menu. There was no doubt that this test was not simple. The system had once said, for the current Bufong, every dish in the God of Cooking's menu was very difficult. If he was not careful, he would be in danger of dying. He did not expect that the advancement test, which he had been looking forward to for so long, would be in front of him. This was not good news for Bufong. However, once he passed the test, the increase he would get would be huge. Bufong's cultivation base was at the 9 Revolution Little Saint, and the advancement test this time would, without a doubt, help him advance from the 9 Revolution Little Saint realm to the Great Sage realm. Once he reached the Great Sage realm and obtained the reward of the turnover task, his cultivation base might soar again. Moreover, he could get a fragment of the God of Cooking's set. The turnover task would definitely have a fragment of the God of Cooking set as a reward. If the advancement test also had a fragment of the God of Cooking set as a reward, he might be able to collect all the fragments at once and obtain the qualification to exchange for it. Bufong was looking forward to the last piece of the God of Cooking set very much. Thus, he naturally couldn't avoid the test this time. Bufong's face became extremely serious in an instant. He answered solemnly in his heart, "System, I accept the test." Chapter 1381. System, I accept the test. As soon as Bufong's solemn voice rang out, the system in his head stopped making any sound. All of a sudden, the surroundings fell into silence, so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everything around him, including the hustle and bustle of Acheron City, disappeared from Bufong's ears. That slightly surprised Bufong. Narrowing his eyes, Bufong waited for the system to continue. Since he had accepted the test, the system would not let him get through it so easily. A dish in the God of Cooking's menu, the 3-cup divine chicken, almost made him make a mistake. If he hadn't thought of many things at the last moment, innovated his cooking method, and improved his mental force, he might not have been able to complete the dish in the God of Cooking's menu. If that were the case, Bufong would have been long gone. Therefore, he still had to feel the necessary tension. Bufong took a deep breath and tensed up his mental force. Buzz, sure enough, as Bufong relaxed, the God of Cooking's menu hovering over his spirit sea suddenly changed. The entire spirit sea seemed to be emitting a rumbling sound, and the roar resounded. The menu flipped, and the spirit sea rumbled. The divine phantom spirit couldn't help but open its eyes, and the fluctuation of its divine spread. The artifact spirits watched in horror. Sure enough, little host encountered another ordeal. Every time he cooked a dish in the God of Cooking's menu, it was actually a trial for his spirit and body. The further he went, the more likely he would make a mistake. Hopefully, little host could get through this test safely. Little host's dish in the last test was chicken. So this time, the golden divine dragon looked at the flipped golden menu and said, "This time it should be fish. There are many ways to cook fish. I wonder what kind of fish the God of Cooking's menu will cook, and it must be very difficult." Vermilion Bird said. After that, they didn't say anything, mainly because they didn't know what to say. Buzz, the golden light of the God of Cooking's menu enveloped Bufong's divine will, making Bufong's divine will as bright as gold. In the kitchen, Bufong's body was also blooming with light. In the next moment, the system's solemn voice resounded. "The host has accepted the test. The test will now begin. Determining the dish from the God of Cooking's menu. Type of dish, fish." Buzz, the system's serious voice disappeared, and a lot of information poured into Bufong's mind, which was all about the God of Cooking's menu. It was about the cooking method of a dish. This method was recorded in great detail. Bufong began to read carefully. 3-flour sweet and sour fish. Bufong fell silent. The sweet and sour fish was a dish that required a lot of skill, and Bufong knew that. That was why he felt pressured. As for the recipe, Bufong studied it carefully, not daring to make any mistakes. If he failed to cook it, he might be erased. Of course, Bufong didn't want to be erased, so he had to work hard to finish this dish. It took Bufong a lot of time to study the recipe. He stood motionless in the kitchen. Time passed quickly. On the horizon, the sun rose, revealing its pink face. As the sun shone on the earth, the quiet Acheron City became lively again. Countless people started a new day of work. In front of Acheron City, in front of Acheron's little restaurant, many people yawned as they lined up in front of the restaurant, hoping to have a hot steamed bun ignored by the God of Cooking. However, this time, they were destined to return disappointed. After waiting for a long time, it was late in the morning. The restaurant's door was still tightly shut. Hades Tenzang had returned. Looking at the closed door, he was a little puzzled. Inside the restaurant, Yu was sitting on a chair with Little Hu in her arms. Hua was sprawled on the dining table in an enchanting manner. The atmosphere in the restaurant was somewhat stagnant. This kind of atmosphere was very different. It made them all serious, not daring to make any movements. In the kitchen, other kinds of auras kept spreading out. Even Lord Go couldn't help but raise his head, looking curiously. What was going on? Lord Go, Hua, you, and the others were all very curious. They had a feeling of palpitation, which was hard to describe. In the kitchen, Bufong finally opened his eyes, and a golden light flashed in his eyes before disappearing. He had finally finished studying the recipe carefully, not daring to make any mistakes. In his heart, he had already carefully considered every step of the recipe. He wanted to ensure that he could cook this dish perfectly. The three-flowered sweet and sour fish was actually a famous dish. In his previous life, he had heard of it many times. Bufong had also cooked it before. However, the God of Cooking's menu was naturally a little different. In the kitchen, on the stove, the ingredients were all prepared. Just like the 3-cup chicken, they were all very ordinary ingredients. They weren't demigod ingredients or great sage ingredients. It was just an ordinary fat grass carp. Grass carp. Bufong looked at it with nostalgia. It had been a long time since he had seen such a familiar fish. It didn't have any spiritual energy. It was just an ordinary fish. However, the ingredients didn't have spiritual energy, but the dishes cooked by Bufong had to have spiritual energy. This was the characteristic of the God of Cooking's menu. Fish, sugar, vinegar, starch. These were all the ingredients for this dish, the 3-flowered sweet and sour fish. Where did the flowers come from? How could they become flowers with only fish? Bufong narrowed his eyes. His hand moved, and the dragon bone kitchen knife fell into his hand. Buzz, the artifact spirits poured into the dragon bone kitchen knife, and at this moment, the knife seemed to move. Obviously, the artifact spirits didn't dare to be careless in this test. In fact, this test was beyond Bufong's scope. However, he had no choice. Bufong didn't get the 3 divine power liquid drops for nothing. This time, Bufong didn't even swing the knife. He grabbed the grass carp, which was still alive. Its mouth opened and closed as if it was breathing. Then he scraped the scales, removed the chest, and removed the gills. Everything was going on in an orderly manner. Bufong rolled up his sleeves. His hands and heart didn't tremble. Buzz, as Bufong began the test of the God of Cooking's menu, a unique aura seemed to spread out. At this moment, the entire Acheron city fell into silence. Everyone could feel the difference in the little restaurant. It was solemn and cold. Even the great sage didn't dare to make any noise. Tianzong and Hades Era stood outside the door, looking at the restaurant with a serious look in their eyes. In the Heaven Chief realm, Lord Dit tore the void and came over. Hovering in the sky above Earth Prison, he looked at Acheron's little restaurant from a distance. In his eyes, Acheron's little restaurant seemed to be bursting with countless rays of light at this moment. In the kitchen, at this moment, Bufong was concentrating on cooking. His whole mind was focused on this dish. The key to the squirrel fish was the processing of the fish. The grass carp was placed on the chopping board. After it was processed, he washed the bloodstains with clean water. Then he began to process it. He cut off the fish head, cut it from the bone, and cut in half. However, the skin and the tail were still attached. With a bend of the knife, he easily dug out the entire fish bone. After removing the fish bones, all the fish bones were taken out without leaving a single one behind. After removing the bones, the next step was the most important part. That was to cut the fish. The knife was used to cut wheat on the fish. It was a kind of knife skill. When the fish was cut with this knife skill, after heating, it would curl up and become as beautiful as wheat flowers. So, this was a test of knife skill. Bufong held the dragon bone kitchen knife. He had rehearsed it countless times in his mind. There was only one ingredient. Once he made a mistake, it would mean that the cooking failed. It wasn't that this knife skill was difficult, but the requirement of the God of Cooking's menu was too strict. Even the gap between the two blades had strict rules. There could not be any deviation, not even a millimeter was allowed. That was why Bufong had to maintain a high concentration of his divine will. Otherwise, once he lost concentration, all his previous efforts would be in vain. Bufong placed the fish on the chopping board. His divine will surged, wrapping the fish. He needed to pay attention to the gap between the fish after the knife was cut. He pressed down on the fish, held the kitchen knife, and inserted the knife into the fish at an angle of 45 degrees, making a neat cut. He made a total of 18 cuts, and the gap between each cut was 0.2 centimeters. This could be considered very precise. The angle between the knife and the fish was also 45 degrees. Moreover, the knife had to reach 2/3 of the fish, no more, no less. The most important thing was not to cut the fish. Because of the different parts of the fish, the thickness of the fish was also different. However, no matter how thick it was, he had to ensure that the knife could reach 2/3 of the fish. After that, he straightened the fish and cut it vertically downwards. This time, the gap between the cuts was also 0.2 centimeters. The gap was very small, so the chef had to be very precise about the distance. If there was a gap of more than 0.2 or less than 0.2, it would mean that the cooking had failed. That was why Bu Fong's divine had almost condensed into a solid substance. His yin and yang Tai Chi spirit sea revolved at a high speed, and his divine was like a hazy fog around him. Bu Fong's eyes were fixed on it, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. One cut, one cut. After each cut, the knife couldn't shake. He had to hold the knife steadily. Moreover, he had to be sure of the distance between the cuts. After finishing one side, he moved on to the other. On the other side, he used the same wheat spike knife. When the last cut was made, Bu Fong pulled out the dragon bone kitchen knife. He took several steps back, exhaling deeply. He looked at the layers of knife lines on the fish, and the gap between each cut was exactly the same. The corners of Bu Fong's mouth rose. It was just a knife skill, but it had consumed a lot of his divine will. Soon, Bu Fong became serious again. He washed the fish, controlled the water, and sprinkled the dry starch on it, making the starch wrap the fish. On the other side, Bu Fong began to heat the oil in the wok. This oil was also the best. The oil was golden yellow, and as the temperature rose, it began to boil. It was foaming at the mouth. Bu Fong put the fish, which had been smeared with starch, into the wok. Instantly, a sizzling sound arose. As the fish entered the wok and was heated, it began to change. Because the gap between the fish was the same, as it expanded, the fish was pushed apart and rolled up. The gap between the pieces was surprisingly the same. The color of the fish wrapped in starch began to change, gradually turning golden. This frying process was relatively easy. However, Bu Fong still had to use his divine will to ensure that the fish was cooked in the wok. If it was overcooked or undercooked, it would affect the taste. Finally, the fish was fried. It got out of the wok with its tail between its legs. The sizzling sound of the oil splashing echoed unceasingly. He took a white plate and placed it on the fish. Bu Fong placed the fried fish on the plate. His divine sense surged and began to condense into golden flowers. The golden flowers were placed around the plate, forming a flower bud. Bu Fong's eyes focused. The consumption of his divine was huge. But the next cooking was the most important, because it was time to cook the sauce, and the sauce was the essence of this dish, the key factor that affected the taste. The so-called 3 flowers were the 3 flowers condensed by his divine will. He placed them on the plate. When the sauce was watered, the divine will flowers bloomed, and the sweet and sour fish was done. If the flowers didn't bloom, it meant that the sauce was not up to standard. This dish failed to cook. Bu Fong's eyes were solemn. He lit the fire, heated the wok, and a violent flame shot up into the sky. Chapter 1382. The cooking of the sauce was crucial because it was the main factor that determined the taste of the sweet and sour fish. Bu Fong poured the tomato sauce into the black turtle constellation wok. The blood-red ketchup looked exceptionally beautiful, as if it was really a blooming flower. Holding the wok handle in one hand, Bu Fong used the other hand to flip the wok, stir-frying the tomato sauce until it was fragrant. The rich aroma filled the air, lingering in Bu Fong's nose. Cool water was poured into the wok to melt the sauce. He sprinkled in seasonings and spices, making the aroma burst out. As soon as it went into his nostrils, it seemed to be refreshing. Bu Fong shook the wok and stir-fried it. He added the wet starch and began to thicken it. This process was very important. The sauce shouldn't be too thick. Otherwise, it would affect the taste. It couldn't be too thin either, or it would affect the taste. Swish, the ladle swayed in the wok. Then, he slowly scooped it up. The sauce in the wok dripped from the ladle, turning into a thread that dripped into the wok. It was just right. The sizzling sound rang out incessantly, and steam billowed out. Bu Fong tilted the wok. Holding the wok, he moved it to the side of the fried sweet and sour fish. He poured the sauce in the ladle into the fish. Instantly, the sauce covered the sweet and sour fish. After being poured with the sauce, the originally golden sweet and sour fish seemed to come to life. The pieces of fish meat on its body seemed to be shaking. A rich aroma suddenly gushed out. The sweet and sour fish on the plate seemed to open its eyes and swim. It was quite eye-catching. While Bu Fong was pouring the sauce, his eyes were fixed on the plate, on the 3 flowers on the plate. These were 3 flower buds that were completely condensed by his divine will. The flower buds didn't bloom, which meant that his dish had failed. However, if the flower buds bloomed, it meant that Bu Fong's dish had been successfully cooked. As for the degree of success, it would depend on the system's evaluation. In fact, for this sweet and sour fish, Bu Fong had pushed his divine will to the extreme, and there was no mistake. The only possibility was the taste of the dish. Voila! The sauce slowly flowed over the fish. Crystal clear, it was incomparably beautiful. As the juice flowed, it gradually came into contact with the 3 spiritual flower buds. As an invisible wave spread out. The first divine flower quietly bloomed. Bits of essence dispersed, seemingly boosting Bu Fong's mental force by a lot. When the juice touched the second spiritual will flower, the spiritual will flower's body trembled. The divine will flower trembled. Then a majestic life force poured into it. The spiritual will flower slowly bloomed, its petals trembling unceasingly. Her beauty was unparalleled. Even Bu Fong sucked in a deep breath. The tri-flowered sweet and sour fish indicated that apart from the sweet and sour fish, the composition of the 3 flowers was also very important. The third flower was also the most important one. Beads of sweat slowly rolled down Bu Fong's forehead because he had consumed too much of his spiritual force. Looking carefully, the whole squirrel fish seemed to have come alive. It really turned into a spiritual creature and roamed in the void. Rich energy was boiling. As the third flower bud, it shook violently. Bu Fong's eyes shrank. Because this flower bud didn't bloom. It didn't bloom. Bu Fong felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Did he fail? That's impossible. Every step he took was done precisely. The juice flowed, covering the third flower bud. Bu Fong swallowed, staring at it. At this moment, it was as if a gloomy darkness had shrouded Bu Fong, making Bu Fong feel extremely cold. As time went by, Bu Fong's spiritual force exploded to the extreme. In his mind, dragons and tigers roared, turtles and birds cried. The tool spirits had displayed their ultimate skills. Swish, when his spiritual force was almost dried up, it was as if spring had returned to the earth and all things had come back to life. The last divine flower seemed to have been stained by the night juice. It slowly changed color, and the tightly closed flower bud trembled. Without a sound, it suddenly bloomed. It kept drifting to both sides. Soon, the flower bud, which looked like it was being held tightly, bloomed. The exquisite leaf was too beautiful to behold. The 3 divine flowers competed with each other, enchanting the eyes. At the last moment, Bu Fong exhaled a long breath. His body and mind seemed to be a little weak. This was the most dangerous time since he started his career. Bu Fong thought he was going to fail. He almost gave up. Fortunately, he persevered. After all, failure meant death, obliteration. No one could afford such a price, not even Bu Fong. Taking 2 steps back, Bu Fong leaned against the cupboard, gasping for breath. At this moment, he finally had time to raise his hand and wipe the sweat on his forehead with his sleeve. In the distance, the squirrel fish lay quietly in the bowl. The red juice was flowing, making the agate-like juice look as beautiful as a gem. This time, the test of the god of cooking's menu was too tough. Bufang almost failed. From the beginning, his mind was in a state of tension, and it had been tense all the way until now. To finish a dish, the pressure needed to do this was very great. It also had a very strict requirement for the divine will. He gently exhaled. Rumble outside the restaurant, in the sky. A series of rumbling sounds resounded. Bufang was a little surprised. This feeling was like a lightning punishment, and it was not an ordinary lightning punishment. Bufang's eyes slightly froze. He didn't walk out of the kitchen with the dish. Instead, he walked out, wearing a chef robe, his hands clasped behind his back. In the restaurant, Yu Little Hu and the others looked at Bufang puzzled. For this dish, Bufang had waited from dawn to dusk. The people who were queuing up outside had all dispersed. Some curious people were still waiting in line. They were still looking forward to Bufang's restaurant. Clang! The people in the restaurant made a noise. The group of people waiting in line woke up instantly. Each of them stood up from the ground and looked at Bufang in surprise. Owner Bu, good evening, Owner Bu. Owner Bu, are you out for a ride? These experts greeted Bufang with a smile. If it were in the past, he would have nodded and said hello to them, but he was not. But at this moment, in Bufang's eyes, there was only the lightning punishment left. That was not an ordinary lightning punishment. It was the real Heavenly Palace's lightning punishment. Tiansong, Era, Yu, Lord Go, and the others were all watching. Lord Go lay under the path understanding tree, narrowing his eyes. This lightning punishment was Bufang's tribulation. No one could help him, not even Xiao Bai. That was because the lightning punishment this time was not just for the dish, but also for Bufang. The people around stopped talking. They seemed to understand the seriousness of the matter. They looked at Bufang, who took a step forward and rose into the sky. The vermilion robe on his body had completely turned scarlet red. His flaming wings spread, and the bird's cry was deafening. Rumble! In the sky, the Thunder Palace appeared. It was a palace in the sea of lightning between heaven and earth. What was that? Many people were shocked. They had never seen such a scene before. A Z-Hugger dragon, dumbstruck. This lightning punishment was not ordinary. It was not only the lightning punishment of the little saint's tribulation to become the great sage. It was so powerful that it was beyond people's imagination. It was somewhat as terrifying as the lightning punishment of a demigod becoming a god. Rumble. In the Thunder Palace, a silver thunder dragon was rolling. The thunder dragon was very vivid and lifelike. Its scales were very obvious, and there were patterns on them. It also had dragon claws, each of which was extremely sharp. It was like the real existence of the thunder dragon had arrived. It was a loud bang. The thunder dragon descended from the sky, emitting a wild and tyrannical aura. Bufang raised his hand. His bandage fell off as he punched at the thunder dragon. This collision represented the recognition of Bufang's strength. It was the beginning of Bufang's baptism. The fist and the thunder dragon collided. Without any suspense, Bufang was swallowed by the thunder dragon. Bufang's figure disappeared from the ground. Only the exploding thunder and lightning were left, spreading out like giant waves. Streak after streak, streak after streak. The ground seemed to be flattened. People's hearts palpitated and trembled. The people who were watching from a distance were all stunned. All of a sudden, the thunder and lightning scattered. Amidst the thousands of lightning bolts, Bufang clasped his hands, slowly stepping into the sky. His body was twirling with lightning, and his black hair fluttered unceasingly. After the baptism of lightning, Bufang's power seemed to be rising unceasingly. As he rose into the air, step by step, he stepped into the air. His aura also underwent a shocking change. From the 9th revolution, Little Saint, to the 1st revolution, Great Sage. Then, the Great Sage went through the 1st round, the 2nd round, the 3rd round, the 4th round. The increase in his cultivation was like climbing a stairway to heaven. With every step he took, Bufang's cultivation would break through by 1 revolution. Once he reached the top, there was no doubt that Bu Fang's cultivation would reach the terrifying ninth revolution Great Sage, or even the consummate Great Sage. What was going on? In the blink of an eye, the 9 revolution little saint broke through to the 9 revolution Great Sage. Was there really such an incredible tribulation in the world? However, the lightning punishment still hadn't disappeared. Every single bolt struck Bu Fang's body. After the thunderbolts dissipated, bits of energy entered Bu Fang's body, urging his physical strength to increase continuously. His black hair was like a whip lashing in the air. His eyes were like torches, and his aura was like a rainbow as he stepped forward. Finally, Bu Fang's aura reached the 9th revolution Great Sage. He stepped on the Thunder Palace, but the Thunder Palace was invisible. However, it only had the appearance and no power. Otherwise, when the sea of lightning exploded, it was enough to destroy the entire Acheron city. Bu Fang opened his eyes. His dried-up divine will began to recover. At this moment, it was like a clear spring had been poured into his spirit sea. His dried-up divine will began to become smooth. As if it had broken the shackles, Bu Fang's divine will rose again. As his aura spread out, Bu Fang felt his body brimming with power. At this moment, many questions in his mind that he didn't understand were solved. The will of the Great Path could no longer stop Bu Fang. Bu Fang's clothes fluttered as he looked at the sky. There seemed to be invisible laws surging, and he, Bu Fang, had finally begun to touch the laws. Boom! He fell from the sky. Bu Fang smashed into the ground, causing it to sink and crack. The lightning punishment in the sky dispersed. Bu Fang exhaled softly. At this moment, he gave people an unparalleled pressure. The Great Sage of the Great Sage realm. Today, Bu Fang finally stood at the peak of this world. He waved his hand. In the kitchen, a stream of light suddenly shot out. A rich aroma spread from the kitchen, lingering in the air. Bu Fang raised his hand. The 3 flowers, sweet and sour fish, floated in Bu Fang's hand. This dish had almost caused Bu Fang to fail and be killed. However, now that it was done, Bu Fang felt a little emotional. The dishes in the God of Cooking's menu could only be tasted by one person. Just like the 3-cup chicken, only you could taste it. Bu Fang held the dish in his hand. His eyes swept across the faces of you, Little Hu, Tian Song, and the others. You had tasted the 3-cup chicken, so you were excluded. Finally, his eyes fell on the Lord Go. Perhaps only the Lord Go could taste this dish. Only the Lord Go could bear the energy contained in the 3 flowers, sweet and sour fish. Chapter 1383. Bu Fang's cultivation base was rising too fast. It was as if he was climbing the ladder to heaven, which shocked everyone. 1 step for 1 revolution, and 9 steps for 9 revolutions. From a 9 revolution little saint, he had broken through to the Great Sage in just a few breaths, and his cultivation base had soared all the way to the Great Sage. This was not a temporary breakthrough caused by eating the fortune flatbread, but a real breakthrough. Bathed in the lightning punishment, Bu Fang made everyone feel something different. They could feel the power emanating from Bu Fang's body. It was a different kind of Great Sage power. Hades, Tenzing, Acheron, Great Sage, and the others squinted at Bu Fang in the sky. They could feel the vigorous energy in Bu Fang's body, which was different from that of an ordinary Great Sage. The lightning punishment Bu Fang was bathing in was too strong, which made Bu Fang's body stronger. It was enough to surpass his peers and surpass the entire body. His body was like a great bell, and his blood and energy were like waves, crashing and surging violently and deafeningly. Bu Fang waved his hand. A stream of light shot out of it. It was a dish, flashing with 7-colored light as it floated in Bu Fang's hand like a raging flame and a colorful cloud. It was a lifelike fish, as if it was about to break free from the shackles of heaven and earth and jump into the fish pond of heaven and earth. Of course, if it wasn't steaming, people might really think it was a live fish. Pieces of fish meat were protruding, as if they were embedded in the fish's body. They were extremely exquisite. Every gem was the same size, and the color was exactly the same. The fish's head and body were separated, and its mouth was open, with faint steam surging inside. Some people were in an uproar. Some people suddenly understood. When they looked at the dish, they understood that Owner Boo was transcending the lightning punishment of his dish. However, this dish was very different. Just by sensing it, people could feel the infinite charm bursting out of it. It was a charm that made people yearn for it. They were attracted just by looking at it. It smells so good. It smells so good. I want to eat it. Even if I have to give up everything, I still want to eat it. Just one bite. Everyone went crazy, and some people's saliva flowed out of their mouths. Just by looking at the squirrel fish in Bufang's hand, he couldn't restrain his desire. It was as if his mind was attracted by this dish. This feeling was indescribable. Bufang was also taken aback by the situation. Because the great sage had broken through to the consummate level, he could sense the peculiar energy contained in the dish. Even Bufang, who had broken through to the level of great sage, did not dare to touch or taste such energy. Perhaps only the Lord Go would be able to taste it. When Bufang looked at the squirrel fish in the bowl, the sweet and sour fish that had been cooked into a dish seemed to have come back to life. The eyes on the fish's head rolled, as if it was looking at Bufang. That made all the hair on Bufang's body stand on end. He took a deep breath. When he looked again, there was nothing unusual. He was sure that the fish had come back to life. Could it be a spirit? Bufang murmured inwardly. Owner Boo, let's have a taste. I have money. I have a lot of money. I'm willing to exchange all my wealth for a bite of the fish. Just one bite. Owner Boo, you're the most handsome. I want to bear your children. Down below, the experts of Acheron City went crazy. The aroma of the sweet and sour fish wafted through the whole city, attracting people to come out and kneel excitedly. Bufang had a headache because of this. Bufang couldn't help but furrow his brows when he heard all kinds of shouts. This dish is not ordinary, said the Lord Go, who was lying at the door. He stuck out his tongue and said, You held little who, looking at the Lord Go doubtfully. What's unusual about it? You asked. She didn't see anything unusual. Instead, she was eager to have a bite. Just like the bowl of 3-cup chicken, it possessed boundless magic power. Bufang's dish seems to have its own consciousness, said the Lord Go in a gentle and magnetic voice. It has its own consciousness. How is that possible? How can a dish have its own consciousness? Yu's eyes shrank, whispering in disbelief. That's right. In her opinion, once an ingredient was made into a dish, it was a dead thing. It was impossible for it to have its own consciousness. I can't explain it. None of you can eat this dish. The Lord Go said, Only I can eat it. Why? Yu was puzzled again. Because the Lord Go glanced at Yu, the dog meat on his face shivering. Because you're all too weak, you, Lord Go, you've changed. You didn't used to act tough before. Buzz, the lightning punishment hovering around him dispersed. Bufang's face turned solemn. He slowly descended from the sky, landing on the ground. His feet stepped on the ground, making squeaking sounds as if he was stepping on a pebble. He looked at the group of people who were drooling, their eyes bloodshot, as if they were about to go crazy. He furrowed his brows. Owner Boo, some people couldn't stand it anymore. In their eyes, there was only the dish in Bufang's hand. They crazily stormed toward Bufang. Bufang furrowed his brows. His mental force, which had just recovered, immediately surged out, turning into a surging force that poured out. Buzz, the experts who were charging at him, immediately knelt on the ground and couldn't move at all. Their eyes were bloodshot, and they tried to get up from the ground. Bufang took a deep breath. All these strange things must have something to do with the dish in his hand. You want to stir up trouble with the dish? Bufang said calmly, glancing at the squirrel fish in his hand. Sure enough, once again, Bufang saw the squirrel fish's eyes roll. The corners of his mouth twitched coldly. With one hand clasped behind his back, he walked toward Acheron's little store. The group of people, who had been suppressed by the divine will, couldn't help but get up and crazily charge toward the restaurant again. However, there was only a creaking sound. The restaurant's door closed with a bang. With a boom, those people seemed to wake up. The sprinting figures all stopped, looking at each other in dismay. Then they all sucked in a breath of cold air. No matter what, they were all little saint experts. How could they be bewitched by someone without being aware of it? It was so creepy. Inside the restaurant, the door was closed. The lights were brightly lit. Bufong clasped his hands, holding the dish. Lord Go, you, Hades Tenzing, Hades Era, and the others were all gathered there. They were all staring at Bufong. Some were curious, and some were doubtful. They had seen everything that had happened outside. The crazy actions of those people shocked them, and at the same time, their hearts seemed to be surging with desire. This dish, Hades Era, was holding the spicy strip in his mouth, but it seemed that even the strip had become tasteless. However, before he could finish, he was interrupted by Bufong. This dish, you can't eat it. Except for Lord Go, no one else can eat it. Bufong said. Why? Hades Era was instantly displeased. Lord Go had eaten so much, and he still wanted to eat it. Why couldn't he be more considerate to thin people like us? It's because of the energy in this dish, isn't it? Tiansong was very rational. He looked at Bufong and asked. Bufong nodded. This dish seemed ordinary, but as the second dish in the God of Cooking's menu, it was a dish that Bufong almost had one foot in the door of failure. Naturally, it was extraordinary. The surging energy in it was not something that an ordinary great sage could bear. This was a dish that had squeezed out all of Bufong's divine will. Bufong's divine will was extraordinary. Before he broke through, his divine will had reached the second realm. That realm had long since surpassed the ordinary great sage, and it was not weaker than the average 9-revolution great sage. However, he was still squeezed out. If it weren't for the special nature of his spirit sea, which constantly nourished his divine will, Bufong might have been squeezed out. So, this dish was not ordinary. I can't accept this. Hades Era held the spicy strip between his lips. He was very unhappy, but he could not eat it. He could only watch a dog eat it. Who could bear this? It was too cruel. Bufong glanced at Hades Era. The corners of his mouth curved upward. Fine, then eat it. As long as you have the guts, eat it. Bufong placed the sweet and sour fish in front of Nether King Erha. A rich fragrance wafted out, and steam rose from it. Hades Era paused. Then he glanced at the squirrel fish. He seemed a little unconvinced. He grabbed the chopsticks. Suddenly, they fell toward the squirrel fish. However, just as he was about to eat it, an inexplicable fear suddenly burst in Hades Era's heart. That kind of fear made him feel very small. This feeling, his hand, which was holding the chopsticks, trembled unceasingly. The chopsticks trembled and eventually fell to the ground. Hades Era opened his mouth to say something, but he found that he didn't know what to say. He could only sigh, sit aside with the spicy strip between his lips, his face gloomy. He would not admit that facing a dish he was afraid. Tiansong and the others smiled and didn't say anything. Bufong pushed the dish in front of Lord Go. Lord Go flicked his tail, jumped up, and landed on the table. Then he walked back and forth around the squirrel fish. Well, Lord Go, I'm going to eat it. Lord Go raised his exquisite paw, licked his lips, and said to Bufong and the others. Bufong nodded. Then, Lord Go no longer hesitated. Suddenly, he started to gobble down the porcelain plate. Ouch! In the distance, the gloomy Hades Era turned his head. When he saw Lord Go eating with his tail wagging, he felt a wave of disgust. Such a delicious dish was fed to a dog. Bufong's eyes lit up. They could see Lord Go's teeth closing and closing as the fish entered his mouth. The onlookers licked their lips. They were indeed tempted by the fish. The fish was crisp and tender. He swallowed it in one gulp like pearls falling on a jade plate. The sweet and sour sauce matched with the fragrant fish. Lord Go ate it as if it were a god. So delicious. It's as good as sweet and sour ribs. Lord Dog said in a muffled voice as he held the porcelain plate. He was eating happily, and his dog tail was wagging. Then, the onlookers felt this strange energy gushing out of the dish. It was a bit of divine energy. Yu's eyes lit up. It was the same when she ate the 3-cup chicken. That energy suppressed the curse in her body and even made the curse fuse with her body, which made her cultivation base soar to today's 9 revolution Great Sage cultivation base. The fish Lord Go ate should be the same dish as the 3-cup chicken she had eaten before. You looked at Bu Fong's side profile. She could feel the anticipation in Bu Fong's heart. Yu was stunned. Then, she understood what Bu Fong was looking forward to. It was a dish in the God of Cooking's menu. Each dish was cooked by Bu Fong with all his skills. It was incomparably delicious. Naturally, the effect was remarkable. Bu Fong was looking forward to seeing what would happen to Lord Go after eating the sweet and sour fish. Would his cultivation base break through? Would he become a real god? All of this was what Bu Fong was looking forward to. Suddenly, everyone's eyes lit up, because Lord Dog had already finished eating the entire 3 flowered sweet squirrel fish. The 3 divine wool flowers on it had also quietly dissipated after the dish was finished. Boom! A moment later, everyone's eyes shrank. Their eyes locked on Lord Go, because Lord Go's body suddenly erupted with an extremely powerful aura. Chapter 1384. In Nether Prison, in Di Ting's territory, a series of cracking sounds rang out, as if bones were colliding with each other. The next moment, the sound grew louder and louder, deafening like a thunderclap. All the powerhouses in the Di Ting clan's territory were scared out of their wits. Di Ting, shrouded in black mist, looked indifferently at the place where the sound came from. There, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was twisting and turning, her body healing. A terrible aura spread, and the oppressive void seemed to be trembling. After a long time, everything returned to peace. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch narrowed her eyes and looked in that direction. Her hair spread out in all directions. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch raised her head. Her swan-like neck was fair and crystal clear. A black robe fluttered, wrapping the Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body. She was shrouded in darkness as she slowly walked out. "Have you recovered?" Di Ting asked in a gentle voice. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch nodded. "It's good that you have recovered. I have a feeling that man is coming back," Di Ting said lightly. Under the black robe, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's pupils constricted and her body tensed up. The next moment, she slowly relaxed. "If he comes back, I'm afraid we won't have a good life. It doesn't matter. I'm the leader of the great netherworld now, so he doesn't dare to kill me. If he does, it will be tantamount to destroying the whole great netherworld, and he will be judged by the experts of the divine dynasty." Di Ting sighed. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch nodded, then stood quietly to one side and did not move. Suddenly, in the black mist, Di Ting raised his head. His eyes suddenly narrowed. As Di Ting rose to his feet, the black mist wrapped around him and slowly swirled around him. The next moment, the black mist began to disperse from his upper body. After a while, a little boy, who looked like he was carved from jade, floated in the air barefooted. "You could transform?" Nether Puppeteer Patriarch looked at the boy in surprise. "I couldn't control the power of the law stably before, but now that I've obtained something from Alpha's worship, it has stabilized my power of the law and allowed me to transform." The little boy was very cute. He had big eyes, long eyelashes, fair skin, and vermilion lips, just like a cute porcelain doll. The little boy was wearing a one-piece dog fur pajamas. He looked chubby and cute. "Actually, I'll be able to transform once I've grasped the laws, but a dog's body is more suitable." The Harkin replied. "However, I'm the leader of the great netherworld now. It's not good for me to show my face in my dog form, so it's better for me to transform into a human form." The Harkin raised its chin proudly. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch didn't know what to say. Suddenly, Di Ting narrowed his eyes and turned his head in the direction of hell. He seemed to be able to feel a powerful law force soaring into the sky. This power was so strong that he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This feeling Ting glanced at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and took a step forward without hesitation. His chubby little hand drew a line in the air, and the void was torn apart. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch paused, then followed Ting into the rift. After a while, the two of them disappeared from where they stood. Hell, Acheron's little store. A rumbling sound rang out. A blast soared into the sky from the top of the restaurant. The shockwave was extremely resplendent, and it soared into the sky, causing the sky to distort. Countless people burst into an uproar. The experts who had lost their composure in front of the restaurant were shocked and kept backing away. But there seemed to be an invisible energy swirling between heaven and earth. The energy pressed down as if to collapse the void. In Acheron's little store, countless people were in an uproar. It was a supreme pressure that made their hearts palpitate. Azee, with the little dragon in her arms, stood not far from the restaurant and watched with her mouth agape. As someone from the great goddess world, she was experienced and knowledgeable. Although she was sold to the Shai divine dynasty's capital as a slave, she had seen many magical things there. For example, she was very familiar with the scene in front of her now. That was a breakthrough. A demigod had broken through to a god. She couldn't believe that such a thing would happen in this little restaurant. Was it that black dog? She remembered that the only one in this restaurant who could break through to the god realm was that black dog. An ordinary demigod breaking through to the god realm could not trigger such a powerful beam of light. It shot straight into the depths of the starry sky to attract the approval of the god who mastered this law. Without a doubt, the power of the law this black dog mastered was absolutely extraordinary. She had once witnessed a top genius of the divine dynasty, the strongest demigod, break through to the god realm in the capital. The momentum at that time was not much stronger than this. She had asked around and learned that the law comprehended by that genius was the law of destruction, one of the supreme laws of the universe. Any existence who comprehended a supreme law was an extremely fearsome existence, even in the divine dynasty. Of course, for this dog, it was not a good thing. The chaotic universe was extremely vast, and there were countless people in it, so there must be many talented creatures born in it. And there must be many existences who comprehended the supreme laws. As the strongest of the 3,000 laws, the supreme laws were naturally supreme. It was precisely because of its supremacy that one needed an incomparably large amount of resources to cultivate this law. If this dog had been born in the divine dynasty, it would have been a joyous occasion. Unfortunately, he was only born in a remote third-class great world. A mere third-class great world did not even have enough resources to support a demigod to become a god. How could it help a dog who had mastered the supreme law step into the god realm? Azee sighed softly. She had seen a lot, and her vision was naturally broader. This mighty breakthrough would eventually fail. Rumble. The beam of light soared into the sky, broke through the shackles of the sky, and rushed into the starry sky. Suddenly, Azee paused. In front of him, the void was torn apart. Then, two figures walked out of it at a steady pace. The leader was a little boy in a one-piece dog fur pajamas. The little boy was so cute. With just a glance, he had attracted Azee's attention. Ting glanced indifferently at Azee, who was holding the little dragon in her arms. There was no emotion in his eyes. Then he clasped his hands behind his back and stood where he was, looking at the beam of light that towered into the sky. The law of time. Earth Prison Dog is indeed Earth Prison Dog. How enviable. Ting murmured softly. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch looked at the beam of light in silence. Azee looked at the little boy and was suddenly shocked. The little dragon at her side began to tremble violently, as if it was afraid of the boy. Is this little boy so strong? Azee hurriedly picked up the little dragon and fled into the distance. In Nether Prison, in the Nether Chef clan, which was connected to the Heaven Chief realm, riding a dragon, Zhuang fell at high speed and smashed into the ground with a rumble. His burly body rolled on the ground for a while before he finally stabilized. Covered in dust, he raised his head and looked around vigilantly. As a chef hired by Alpha, Zhuang did not expect such a terrible thing to happen on this trip. Alpha was an emissary of the divine dynasty, and he had a noble status. He could not believe that he was killed in this remote third-class great world. He, Zhuang, had boarded a pirate ship and been implicated. Where am I? Zhuang jerked his head around. A faint aroma filled the air, which was the aroma of food. As a chef, Zhuang was naturally very familiar with the aroma. However, he had a strange feeling in his heart. Everything around him was barren. There were stoves made of stones around him. These stoves were pitch black, and each of them was covered in green moss. At the center of these stoves was a huge altar. Yes, it was an altar. On the altar, there were broken bowls and broken beast bones scattered on top of them. Where am I? It seems to be a long-abandoned sacrificial ground. But what's with those open-air kitchens? Zhuang was puzzled. A sacrificial ground in a remote third-class great world? Zhuang was not afraid of anything. Although his cultivation base was not very strong because he was obsessed with cooking, he was a perfected great sage, so he should have no problem doing whatever he wanted in this world. He fiddled with the scattered objects on the altar. Standing in the center of the altar, Zhuang jerked his head up and looked around. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth curved upward. A ball of flame emerged in his hand. Then he threw it out. The flame crawled under the stoves and burst into a monstrous blaze. Boom! One by one, the stoves began to burn as if they were infected by the flame. The brilliant light was dazzling and eye-catching. Boom! Flames extended from the stoves and spread to the altar. Zhuang was startled. He turned and was about to leave. However, his supreme pressure suddenly spread out from the bottom of the altar. The flames spread and turned into an array. The array spun and seemed to communicate with a distant place. This is Zhuang's jaw dropped, and he was dumbfounded. He found it hard to believe. What is this? Buzz, suddenly, the array was projected out. A towering and majestic figure seemed to have appeared in the sky. A terrible pressure spread. It was as if a terrible existence was looking straight at them from a distant place. My believers, why have you summoned me? A terrible voice rang out in Zhuang's ears like a thunderclap. Coming from the divine dynasty, Zhuang was naturally knowledgeable. He sucked in a cold breath. A god? A god. Rumble, the gigantic existence rolled its eyes and slowly looked down, bringing with it a terrifying pressure. I am a god. Your god? I am the god of Chef's Challenge. In Acheron's little restaurant, Lord Go was lying on the table. A terrible aura kept bursting out of his body, towering into the sky. It was extremely powerful, and it contained the power of the law, which made the crowd retreat. Bufong's dish had actually made Lord Go complete the power of the law. Was Lord Go going to become a god? The spicy strip in Hades' mouth seemed to fall off. This dog has secretly become a god. Waves of air surged. Lord Go was lying on the table, his fat jiggling at this moment. As the airwaves blew, the fat on his body flapped noisily. Hades' couldn't help but want to laugh. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, his father, Tian Song, slapped him on the head. Be serious. Look carefully. It will help you break through in the future, Tian Song said seriously. The law Lord Go comprehended was definitely not ordinary. The mysterious characters hovering around him seemed to have come from ancient times. Is this the supreme law that Ozzy mentioned? That's right. He recalled Alpha's shocked face when he faced Lord Go. There was no doubt that what Lord Go comprehended was the supreme law. Bufong focused his eyes and watched seriously. Suddenly, his mind flickered. He sensed the powerful aura outside the restaurant. He glanced at Tian Song and the others. Then, he clasped his hands behind his back and walked toward the door. Yu, holding little Hu in her arms, gave Bufong a puzzled look. Bam! The restaurant door closed again. Lord Go continued to break through in the restaurant. Tian Song and the others were also comprehending. Bufong walked out of the restaurant. In the distance, two figures, emanating oppressive auras, echoed each other from a distance. Their leader was a cute little boy carved from jade. Looking at the little boy, Bu Fong raised his eyebrows. "Oh, Di Ting, are you here to ruin this breakthrough?" Di Ting smiled. When he smiled, he had beautiful dimples on his face, which made him look harmless. He looked at Bu Fong with a gentle look. "The great netherworld doesn't need two gods. I am enough." Chapter 1385. The great netherworld did not need two gods. These were Di Ting's words and his true thoughts. It took a huge amount of resources to cultivate a god. The netherworld had just become a great world, and the power of the laws lingered in the air. However, it was basically impossible to provide two demigods for them to become gods. Since it was impossible, only one of them could become a god. In today's netherworld, only he and Earth Prison Dog were the most likely to become gods. Truth Listener was naturally more willing to let itself become a god. Only by becoming a god could it see a broader landscape. If all the resources were used up by Earth Prison Dog, would he stay in this realm for the rest of his life? Would he never make any progress? He could not, and he would not allow that to happen. Di Ting, clad in a one-piece dog fur suit, hovered in midair. He looked like a little boy, with a gentle smile and dimples on his face. But his words sent chills down the spine of those who heard them. They were full of killing intent and killing intent. The door of the restaurant was closed. Bu Fong stood in front of the restaurant with his hands clasped behind his back. The wind was blowing, making Bu Fong's hair flutter slightly. He looked indifferently at Di Ting in the distance. Their gazes met peacefully in midair. Bu Fong, who had just broken through, carried an oppressive aura. 9 Revolution Great Sage. To be honest, Di Ting was a little shocked. Bu Fong's breakthrough was too fast. 1 second ago, he was just a 9 Revolution little saint, and the next moment, he had passed the lightning punishment and stepped into the realm of the Great Sage. This kind of cultivation speed really made him think of that person involuntarily. Back then, he had shaken the world and suppressed everything. He was the man who had truly slaughtered a god. What a pity. Although Bu Fong's cultivation base had reached the level of the Great Sage, the gap between a Great Sage and a demigod was still too great for him to cross. It was wishful thinking for Bu Fong to stop him. With his hands clasped behind his back, the smile on Di Ting's face gradually disappeared, and so did his dimples. Suddenly, a shadow appeared in front of him. Swoosh! Nether Puppeteer Patriarch emerged again. Bu Fong's eyes fell on Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's god's heart had been taken away by Xiao Bai, and it was on the verge of disintegration. Could it be that Truth Listener obtained something good from Alpha's worship? Bu Fong thought to himself. It was not difficult to figure this out. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch looked at Bu Fong with resentment in his eyes. If it wasn't for Bu Fong's puppet, she wouldn't have ended up in such a miserable state. The worship origin stone in his body was much weaker than the god's heart from before. After losing the heart of God and using the battleship origin stone to fuel her physical body, her growth rate was completely fixed. Since there was hatred, it could only be quelled by killing. Boom! Nether Puppeteer Patriarch growled. Immediately, his figure turned into a ghost and shot toward Bu Fong at high speed. She wanted to make Bu Fong pay for everything she had suffered. She wanted to refine Bu Fong into a puppet, to vent the hatred in her heart. In the distance, Ah Zi, holding the little dragon in her arms, shuddered when she saw that. Sure enough, in third-rate worlds, wars and killings for the sake of resources to become gods were inevitable. In backward worlds, the resources they had were limited, and no one was willing to give up their resources to others. That woman should be a puppet, and the source stone in her body should be Alpha's worship. The energy provided by the source stone was so powerful that it was enough to raise the cultivation base of this female puppet to a higher level. Not to mention the demigod expert. This time, the restaurant was really going to be obliterated. That black dog's dream of becoming a god would be completely wiped out as well. Aziz sighed softly. She took the little dragon and moved a distance away from the chaotic battlefield. She didn't want the aftermath of the battle to engulf them. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch flew over. As it flew, its body suddenly changed. Metal spider legs that looked like spears appeared on its back. The tip of the spider spear exuded a dark color and was incomparably sharp. A ripping sound rang out. The spider spear fiercely pierced downwards, as if it wanted to pierce through the air and shatter it. The terrible spear slashed hard at Bufong's side. A loud rumble rang out. Bufong's figure disappeared from where he was. Waves of air surged, and a deep pit appeared in the ground in front of the restaurant. "I'm going to kill you." Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's long hair spread out, and his face was ferocious. The 8 long spears pierced down once again. In an instant, it was as if they had sealed off everything around Bufong. Clang, clang, clang. A crisp sound rang out. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's 8 spears stabbed a black walk. The black walk was incomparably huge, and it was covered with ancient patterns. The spider spears slashed down, but they only produced a burst of sparks and failed to pierce the walk. Bufong grabbed a corner of the black walk with one hand. A Taoyu's roar rang out from his arm, and black and white energy swirled around it. Holding the black walk, Bufong threw it out. With a rumble, he pushed against the spider spears and smashed them toward Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Bufong was now a 9-revolution great sage. He had completed the advancement test of the god of cooking's menu and the task of earning enough revenue. And now, Bufong. Every move he made had the demeanor of a top great sage. To put it simply, Bufong's fighting prowess was not weaker than Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's. Besides, Bufong was famous for being able to fight above his level. When he was a 9-revolution little saint, he could fight the great sage. Now, he had truly become a 9-revolution great sage. How could he be a weakling? He had no fancy moves or special tricks. All Bufong had was a black walk that he swung down. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's pupils constricted. The next moment, 8 spider spears piled up in front of her, trying to block Bufong's walk. Suddenly, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch seemed to sense something incredible. She found that there seemed to be black and white energy swirling in the walk. "What is that?" Nether Puppeteer Patriarch paused. However, before she could think about it, the walk smashed down with a rumble. A deafening rumble rang out. The ground shook. The ground looked like it was about to crack open. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was pushed to her knees by the black walk. In front of the restaurant, the ground exploded with a loud bang, and a deep depression appeared. The buildings in Acheron City began to collapse. It was a horrible scene. "There's yin and yang in the walk. Can you withstand it?" Bufong asked faintly, looking at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. A rumble rang out. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's 8 spider spears exploded, and she flew backward, sliding across the ground. Her body was covered in cracks. Under the walk, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was defeated. Even D. Ting's pupils constricted involuntarily. In Acheron City, countless experts who were secretly watching the battle sucked in a cold breath. Is this still Owner Boo? He knocked away the second strongest expert of Nether Prison with one walk, and almost crushed her. Even Hades Tenzang had to spend a lot of effort to fight Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Buzz the Black Turtle Constellation walk flew back with a rumbling sound. It hovered in Bufong's hand. Yin and Yang swirled on his Tao Tai arm, and the 2 energies existed in the walk. Aziz was dumbfounded. How could the chef who could cook so delicious be so strong? He seemed a little different from the chef she knew. There were many chefs in the Divine Dynasty, but because they were obsessed with cooking, their fighting strength was very weak. They rarely spent time studying fighting techniques. Take Zhuang, for example. Although his cultivation base was not bad, it was just that, if he had met Nether Puppeteer Patriarch just now, he would have been turned into a sieve in an instant. However, that was not the case for Bufong. Under the walk, the woman was almost crushed. "He's so strong," Aziz murmured. Rumble. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch who was almost crushed by the walk, flew into a rage. She screamed, her long hair waving, and her eyes filled with monstrous killing intent. She didn't want to admit the fact that the chef, who was like a speck of dust in her eyes, could now fight her head-on. She was Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, the second strongest expert of Nether Prison. Suddenly, a chubby little hand rested on her shoulder. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, who was screaming, paused and looked over in confusion. "That's enough. Back off. You are no match for him," D-Ting said gently. His voice was mellow and soothing. That gave Nether Puppeteer a pause. The next moment, a defiant look came into her eyes. "No, I could do it. Give me another chance." Nether Puppeteer Patriarch cried out. She wanted to perform well in front of D-Ting. She didn't want to disappoint him again. A gentle look came over D-Ting's face, and his dimples emerged. He rubbed Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's head and said softly, "It's okay. Leave it to me." Nether Puppeteer Patriarch froze. Bufong narrowed his eyes and looked at D-Ting. The black turtle constellation walk, which had shrunk to the size of a blue and white porcelain bowl, hovered over his hand. Suddenly, D-Ting raised his head and his aura locked onto him. Rumble. Bufong felt as if his heart was being gripped by a big hand. It was as if a terrifying existence was looking down from the heavens. D-Ting was high and mighty. As a demigod, he could ignore the great sage. Although demigods were not beyond the great sage, they were closer to gods than the great sage. Moreover, they had begun to master the power of the law. The power of the law was not complete. When they fully comprehended and mastered it, they could break through the shackles and break through to the god realm. With his hands clasped behind his back, D-Ting slowly floated forward. Slowly, he moved toward Bufong. A gust of wind rose like a stormy sea. Yellow sand soared into the sky, kicking up a cloud of dust. A terrible pressure seemed to fall from heaven and earth, pressing down on Bufong, trying to make Bufong kneel on the ground. A demigod was also a god, and he also had the pressure of God. "Are you sure you want to stop me?" D-Ting said. His voice seemed to come from 1,000 miles away, lingering in the air. He was talking to Bufong. "Even if you are that man's inheritor, like him, you are facing a god. If a god wants to kill you, you can't live." D-Ting said. Hovering in midair, he slowly approached. Creak, creak. The ground began to creak as if it couldn't bear the heavy burden. There seemed to be a deep ravine under Bufong's feet, separating D-Ting from the restaurant. In Acheron, everyone was silent. They dared not make any moves. D-Ting, the demigod, had a terrible pressure. Compared with the last time, D-Ting's control of the demigod's power was more skillful and perfect. It was even more terrifying. Did Onorbu really want to stop it? Would he be able to block it? "You're just a demigod, not a god. Don't flatter yourself," Bufong said with a straight face. Buzz, the Taiji spirit sea, instantly erupted as if raging waves were surging. His divine will, which had reached the third realm, exploded. It was a loud bang. A golden ripple spread out from Bufong's body, rolling up thousands of waves. "Divine will," D-Ting sneered. Buzz, his mind flickered. Black smoke gathered behind him, and his divine will materialized, turning into a burly figure that blotted out the sky, looking down at Bufong. Behind Bufong, the phantom spirit sat cross-legged, opened its eyes, and looked straight at the black figure. The power of the divine will and the divine will collided in an instant. Black and gold collided in the void. Boom, a suppressive force that acted on one's soul rushed out. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines, and their legs trembled in fear. It was a kind of palpitation that came from the soul. D-Ting's eyes turned black. At this moment, they were extremely cold, like a true god. How can divine will fight against divine will? This is the gap between realms. "Break," D-Ting said coldly. His voice was emotionless. Boom. The next moment, his divine will suddenly materialized, turning into a monstrous dog paw. The white dog paw blotted out the sky and slapped toward Bufong. It wanted to smash Bufong's divine will with one paw. Chapter 1386. A dog's paw swept across the sky. Ting's paw was completely different from the Lord Go's paw. A terrible power was spreading. It was condensed from the divine sense and possessed great power. Ordinary people wouldn't even dare to resist. Bufong's divine will phantom spirit hovered behind him. Its eyes opened, which were clear and bright. There seemed to be dazzling light constantly bursting out of its eyeballs, projecting on the dog's paw that was slapping toward it. Divine will against divine sense. Was the gap in level really irresistible? Demigods, who were close to God, all had condensed divine sense, which was the highest level of mind cultivation. As for the higher levels, the system didn't say much. Divine sense was also divided into levels. Bufong didn't know the specifics. Buzz, two streams of black and white gas suddenly appeared under the golden divine will phantom spirit. They were the figures of two Tao-Tais, one black and one white, hovering in the air, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, playing with each other. From the earliest soul of Tao-Tai, it had transformed into the black and white yin and yang gas. As the two spun, invisible energy seemed to pour into Bufong's divine will phantom spirit. It made Bufong's divine will phantom spirit more and more solid, like a golden man descending to the world, extremely dazzling. The divine will phantom spirit raised its hands toward the sky. There was a loud bang. Ting's divine will dog's paw slapped down. The rumbling sound shook one's soul. It was an attack on the soul. The wind kept howling. The dog fur jumpsuit on Ting's body fluttered in the air. Buzz, all of a sudden, Ting's eyes narrowed. He looked into the distance. He thought that his divine will claw would be enough to shatter Bufong's divine will and kill him completely. He didn't expect that Bufong's divine will could block his divine will. How is this possible? Ting murmured. There was a look of disbelief in his eyes. In the distance, Bufong's divine will shadow raised its hands to the sky and blocked the claw that was slapping down. Under the attack of his divine sense, Bufong's divine sense seemed to be in imminent danger. But no matter what, he still managed to block it. When divine sense clashed with divine sense, it should have been a crushing victory. This was the difference in levels, just like the difference between a god and a human. Why was Bufong able to surpass such a gap? Even if it was that person, it was impossible. The shock in Ting's eyes gradually disappeared, replaced by a solemn look. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing her cute dimples. Interesting, Buzz, as soon as Ting finished speaking, his divine sense condensed again, and the next moment a white short-legged dog seemed to appear behind him, roaring at Bufong. Another claw slammed down heavily. Boom! The invisible tremor seemed to shatter the void. Bufong stood on the spot with his hands clasped behind his back. His expression was much more solemn. The golden divine will phantom shadow shone brightly like a blazing sun. He raised both hands to the sky and blocked another blow. Nourished by the yin and yang energy, Bufong's divine will was stronger than he had imagined. I can't go on like this. Although my divine will can block the divine will, it consumes too much. Bufong must get rid of this state. Bufong glanced at Ting. Then he grabbed the black turtle constellation wok and threw it toward Ting. Yin and yang energy swirled inside the wok, making the already heavy wok even heavier. It was getting heavier. Creaking noises resounded as the air crumbled and the void shattered. A turbulent flow surged. Boom! Ting raised his chubby palm and collided it with the black turtle constellation wok. The moment they made contact, the Harkin's expression changed. No wonder Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was smashed by the wok. The wok's weight was unimaginable. Even he, a demigod, felt it was heavy. Looking at the black and white yin and yang fishes swirling in the black wok, Ting's eyes grew more and more serious. Bang! The black turtle constellation wok was slapped away. It sped toward Bu Fang's location. Bu Fang stepped into the void, grabbed the black turtle constellation walk, and his phantom divine will faded away. Step by step, he headed toward the battlefield of the stars. Acheron City was not a place to fight. Once they went all out, the whole Acheron City would be destroyed. So, Bu Fang led the fight to the battlefield of the stars. At this moment, Bu Fang had a fire burning in his heart. He really wanted to fight to his heart's content. After breaking through to the level of the great sage, in an instant, Bu Fang felt as if there was a burst of air in his chest. The battlefield of the stars, countless stars twinkled. Meteors flew, and turbulence surged in the void. Bu Fang flew over, stepping on the starry sky, step by step. Down below, the clouds exploded. Di Ting clasped his hands behind his back and slowly floated over. As he floated, the exploding clouds in the sky seemed to tumble. Terrifying divine sense surged, as if the whole starry sky was sealed. "You're so arrogant. You want to fight me?" Di Ting said. Bu Fang was a 9-revolution great sage, and he had reached the peak of the 9-revolution great sage realm. The growth of his cultivation base was heaven-defying. However, no matter how heaven-defying he was just a great sage. How could the great sage compete with a demigod? The pressure of the divine sense alone was enough to make Bu Fang feel despair. In the starry sky, the two of them hovered, facing each other. Di Ting was not in a hurry. It was not easy to become a god. He did not know how long it would take for Earth Prison Dog to become a god. As long as he killed Bu Fang, he could easily destroy Earth Prison Dog's everything. So, at this moment, his focus was Bu Fang. "Do you want to challenge a god?" Di Ting said with a smile. Bu Fang looked at Di Ting and took a deep breath. Then, the black turtle constellation walk disappeared. What appeared next was the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. A resplendent dragon roar resounded through the sky. There seemed to be a 5-clawed golden dragon hovering behind Bu Fang. He held the kitchen knife horizontally. Bu Fang pointed at Di Ting. His divine will burst out, causing Bu Fang's aura to soar as if he was climbing a stairway to heaven. Soon, he broke through the shackles. The divine will phantom hovered in midair. It also held a kitchen knife in its hand. Imitating Bu Fang's action, it pointed at Di Ting. Its aura was very domineering. "One slash, cutting immortal," Bu Fang said, as soon as his voice rang out. His voice was like thunder, exploding in the starry sky. Countless knife lights shot out, crossing the starry sky. Eventually, thousands of knife lights gathered into one blade. The blade seemed to slash down from the chaos. As it tore down, the starry sky exploded. Countless void turbulences were bursting forth. At this moment, Bu Fang's strength was on full display. Today, Bu Fang finally stood at the peak of the netherworld. This slash had the aura of the sword path's 10,000 swords returning to origin. It was like the god of cooking's knife. Rumble. The huge knife light slashed down. It seemed slow, but in fact it was very fast. In an instant it approached. Boom! Di Ting hovered in midair. Looking at the knife light, a smile came over his face. It was indeed a fool's dream for the great sage to want to kill a god. Even though he was only a demigod, he was not someone Bu Fang could blaspheme. "I'll let you feel the true power of a god," Di Ting said. His voice was like a great bell, ringing in the starry sky. The next moment, his body began to crumble. It was as if a ray of light was descending and lingering around him. An aura that seemed to fall from the chaos spread completely. The knife light slashed down. However, Di Ting hovered in midair, bathed in light. He flicked his finger at the knife light. His chubby finger flicked the knife light, causing it to tremble. A crisp sound rang out. Buzz. The next moment, Bu Fang's immortal cutting knife collapsed inch by inch in an instant. Mysterious runes hovered around Di Ting's chubby palm. Each rune was extremely profound, and anyone who looked at it would be attracted. Gods are called gods because they have mastered the laws. In front of the power of the laws, you are like a speck of dust. Di Ting raised his palm, and the runes on it kept fluttering. Although I'm not as good as Earth Prison Dog, he comprehended the supreme law of the universe. I'm not as good as him, but the law I comprehended is not weak either. Among the 3,000 laws, my law is light. Di Ting said. As soon as his voice rang out, Di Ting threw a palm at Bufang. The palm was extremely heavy, and the power of the law surged on it. The law of light. Bufang paused. Light shines on the earth. Light shrouds heaven and earth. Light backer or die. Di Ting's eyes turned black. The terrible palm that blotted out the sky slapped down toward Bufang. Rumble. Bufang's mind trembled. He wanted to move sideways to avoid the palm. To his horror, he found that everything in the starry sky had been sealed. He wanted to dodge, but he couldn't. Forced to the extreme, he could only take this attack head-on. A demigod was, after all, a demigod. The power of the law was a level higher than the will of the great path. Bufang felt a little powerless. Wherever the palm of light fell, everything collapsed and died as if it had merged with the light. It destroyed everything. Di Ting looked on indifferently. Die. As soon as his voice rang out, the palm instantly enveloped Bufang. Boom! The sound of an explosion rang out, and the battlefield of the stars was ravaged. Buzz! Even Earth Prison was shaken by the explosion. It was as if it was about to be destroyed. It was a terrible feeling. Countless people looked up at the sky as if they wanted to see through it and see the battle in the starry sky. A ball of light enveloped the starry sky. It was as dazzling as the sun. Di Ting hovered outside the ball, his clothes fluttering in the wind. It's over. Di Ting looked at the ball of light, surging with the power of the law, and said faintly, no matter how heaven-defying Bufang was, with the great sage's cultivation base, he could not escape from the ball of light formed by the power of the law. It was a gap in power. The power of the law was much stronger than the will of the great path. Even though his law of light was not the strongest law of the universe, it was not something Bufang could resist. This was why demigods were above the great sage. The Harkin exhaled softly. Even though Bufang was that man's inheritor, it was the same. Di Ting clasped his hands behind his back, revealing his cute dimples. Then, he turned and slowly floated toward Earth Prison. The battle had ended too quickly, causing him to feel a wave of dullness. At the demigod level, Di Ting could feel the loneliness. Perhaps only Earth Prison Dog could compete with him. The feeling of not having an opponent was indeed lonely. But soon, even Earth Prison Dog would disappear. He was the only god in the great netherworld who was needed. He was the true god of the netherworld. Boom! A loud noise rang out. The ball of light exploded. Terrible blasts of air shot out of it. Di Ting, who had turned around, froze. He slowly turned his head and looked over. There, the ball of light was slowly collapsing and exploding. Within the ball of light, a figure slowly appeared. Bufang's vermilion robe was crimson, and the flaming wings on his back spread out. His divine will enveloped the area. Around him, 4 magic arrays were floating in the air. Bufang, on the other hand, was holding a dried pot. The soup was boiling in the pot, making a gurgling sound. Around him was the light of nirvana, which kept collapsing and surging. Bufang looked at Di Ting with an expressionless face. Under Di Ting's astonished gaze, his divine will surged. The yin and yang energy, wrapped in the arrays, rushed into the perishing pot. Gourmet array, boost, explode, imprison time. The 4 completely fused. Then, the projection of the heaven and earth farmland appeared over Bufang's head, and the terrible will of the great path descended with a rumble. The will of the great path can't fight against the laws. Bufang raised his eyes slightly and looked at Di Ting. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. The corners of his mouth curved upward slightly as he said, "Do you want to try?" As soon as he said that, Bufang threw out the perishing pot with the 3 gourmet arrays. It turned into a stream of light and flew toward Di Ting. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.